Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this What If story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 on Wattpad. Now let's start. Izuku's POV rules. That's what defines this world. Everything followed rules. He understood that from a young age. No hard feelings there. After all, he was defined by his own rules. He just wished that other people wouldn't define him by their own rules. Rules were his pair of shackles for him. Something he could never break free from. No matter how hard he tried. No matter how hard he cried. No matter what he did. They were always there. A gleaming pair of words and opinions surrounding his wrists. Holding him down. Holding him back. His rules were enough. He thought. Enough for him. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't watch your mother cry at your father's funeral. It's better to look away. Don't look at people's faces as they say their goodbyes. Tune out their empty words. Don't remember that night he died. Don't remember watching your mother waking up from her deep sleep as a villain escapes out their bedroom window. Don't watch her choke on her own screams and his BLD as she awakens. Don't watch as the police arrive. Don't. Close your eyes, close your ears. Don't hate the world. Hate leads to more misfortune. No, those weren't rules. The rules came later. Those don'ts came from his personal experience. Flashback, mommy. The poor green-haired boy shouted, trying to get his mother to listen to him. Mommy, I'm so excited. What quirk do you think I'll get? I'll use it to save people. Just like All Might. His mother's blank face scared him and he shouted again. With a flinch, she looked at him and smiled fondly. Her eyes leak tears as she reaches down and grabs his hands in hers. They were in the waiting room at the doctor's. She was yet to get over her husband's death. She would be strong again. For him and her son. She owed it to them after all. Her face hardened with resolve. She would protect her baby. Oh, Aizu. She whispers fondly. I'll be happy with whatever you get. The little boy laughs and with a sigh, his mother lets go of his hands and thinks. At least something is going in the right direction for us. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵𝐵 and Izuku 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵𝐵. A nurse calls. They stand up and she smiles kindly down at the green-haired boy. Are you ready? He nodded vigorously and she smiles again. Will then follow me. They followed her into the doctor's room. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 watches as the doctor examines Izuku. His facial expression twitches and she braces herself for her son's results. He starts and clears his throat before turning to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵. I'm sorry your son doesn't have a quirk. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵's heart dropped in her chest. Her son didn't have a quirk. But his dream of becoming a hero. Izuku was still smiling and humming. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 takes a deep breath. I understand. Is there anything we can dash? Oh. The doctor says. But me and my late husband both had a quirk, so dash. No. The doctor says again. I'm sorry your son is quirkless and there are no signs of him getting a quirk ever. Now please exit this room as quickly as you can. I have more important patients waiting. His voice was edgy and he kept fidgeting every time he looked at Izuku. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 glares at the doctor before standing up and staring down at the doctor. Izuku bounced up in his chair as he stood up. So what quirk did I get? He asks. His brain wasn't really there. He was too busy daydreaming about being a hero with his awesome quirk that he didn't pay attention. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 crouches down in front of her son and looks him in the eye before swallowing hard. With a pained voice she says. I'm sorry Izuku. You don't have a quirk. But what about my dream? Of becoming a hero? Give up on it. The doctor says, turning around in his chair to face his computer. You'll die. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 swallows her anger and refrains herself from hitting the man. With a deep breath she tells him, just you wait. He'll show you, my son will become the greatest hero ever. The doctor barks a sharp laugh and stands up. He's shorter than 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵, but it feels like they're leagues apart. He points to the door. Good luck on that. Just outside of the room and after hearing the door click shut behind her, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 squats down and looks at her stunned son in the eye. Aizu. She says softly. Aiza, look at me. He looks at her and she smiles. Aiza, you don't need power to be a hero. You're already my hero. I believe that you can be everyone's hero too. He smiles softly and she holds her tears back as she says, Aiza, don't ever give up on your dream. You have to believe that anything is attainable as long as you want to attain it. He nods seriously and Inko stands back up. The nurse from earlier was standing there the entire time and Inko blushes, worried that she had overheard everything. I'm sorry, they both say at the same time. Inko looks at her and the nurse says, I overheard everything, that your son is quirkless. Inko gives her the so what, and the nurse gulps. I just wanted to come and say that that what? That he could still be a hero. Inko stands there stunned. How did you know? The nurse flushes again. The entire time you were waiting your son was saying how excited he was to get his quirk and be the best hero. Like All Might. Inko starts but Izuku darts from her side, letting go of her hand and hugs the nurse. The nurse smiles softly and whispers, I've always wanted kids. The lady kindly leads them back to the entrance. Just as Inko and Izuku were about to enter the car, Inko remembers that she left her phone in the doctor's office. Izuku, stay here. She orders as he gets in the car. She locks the car to be safe and without waiting for her son's reply, she sprints back in to get her phone. As she rushes through the automatic door, she tries hard to remember the way to the office. After a couple of wrong turns and a couple of suspicious glances from the staff, she finally makes it to the doctor's office and without knocking because he deserves that, she opens the door. Inko enters the room just as she sees a villain with a long bludgeon swinging right at her head. The doctor was already dead, slumped against the wall. There was red BLD splattered everywhere. Her eyes widen as she takes in the masked villain as she sees the weapon zoom towards her forehead. Izuku's POV. Don't forget what your mother said. Izuku was at his school. It has been 11 years since his mother died. More years he existed without her. Midoriya. His teacher said, drawing his attention back to class. He flushes pink and stammers. Yeah. The teacher glares at him. If you want to go to UA, then you better pay more attention in class. I was just saying that 2 students were applying to UA. You are applying, right? And so is Katsuki. The poor boy flushes again, this time from anger. Yeah, I've applied for UA. Ha! A certain blonde, spiky-haired boy cackles with laughter. Shitty, do you wants to get into UA? The rest of the class laughs, treating Izuku like a joke. Just in time, the end of the school bell rings. The teacher sighs and leaves the classroom. As he leaves, he manages to throw Izuku a cold smirk. Bakugo crosses the room towards where Izuku was trying to pack up as quickly as he could. As Izuku tried to put his journal number 13 into his backpack, Bakugo grabs it and blasts it out of the classroom. With his small mini explosion noises coming from his hands, he advances towards Izuku. Izuku watches, eyes wide as his notebook, in all its burn and flaming glory, smash into the window and shatter it before continuing to fall. Oi! The other boy screams in front of his face. Izuku shivers as Bakugo puts his exploding hand near Izuku's face. Drop out. From what? Izuku asks. From you know what I mean. Izuku takes a deep breath and Bakugo grabs his wrist before launching him towards the front blackboard. He hits the wall with his back and there's a loud thud before Izuku peels off from the wall and slams face first into the ground. Bakugo picks him up by the collar and presses his sizzling palms on one of Aiza's forearms. It slowly sizzles and burns. Nothing more happens. No emotions from the other poor boy. Bakugo lets out a breath and turns away. If you really want to be a hero. His voice quiets down and he looks at his childhood friend with dark eyes. Wish for a quirk and take a swan dive off a roof. You'll be saving everyone that way. Izuku shudders as Bakugo exits the classroom with his friends, Izuku's other tormentors. As he slowly goes down the stairs and towards the entrance of the school, his teacher passes by from the teacher lounge and stops him. With an innocent look, this devilish man says, Midoriya, maybe no. This time Izuku speaks firmly. I'm not giving up. Not yet. Not ever. He marches past his teacher and stops to get his shoes before sprinting out around the back of the school to get to his notebook. Kaken. Not Kaken. Bakugu. That idiot. How could he dash? I dash. What? As he grabs his 13th notebook on heroes, he groans at all the burn marks. All his hard work was ruined. By his stupid childhood friend. I'm going to kill Dash. He couldn't. He wasn't a villain. Like that man who had murdered his father. Plus, there were certain rules that he, Izuku, couldn't break. Like he said, shackles be shackling. Quirkless people don't fight back. Don't talk back. You are nothing. Believe it. Relieve it. Anything. Anything. Can happen to you and you can't do anything. No one will believe you, so don't talk to people. Give up. You can't be a hero. No, actually. You're not allowed to be a hero. There were so many more rules for being quirkless. It was as if by being different, by being less, society too deemed you as a person less. He starts walking back home to the orphanage, still deep in thought, and he passes under a bridge. He walks by a manhole, and as Izuku passes it, a green slime-like thing slithers out. Yai. It says in a laid-back way as slowly engulfs Izuku. Izuku mumbles. His notebook is on his floor and the slime thing is slowly choking him. WSPP. He slowly gasps trying to breath, but every time he tries to draw air in, slime slowly slides down his throat. He can only GG from practice so many times. As his vision slowly fades to dark black, Izuku breathes in a gasp of fresh air. But that was a joke, right? The CK. Could they be joking? Was the author duping everyone? It wasn't. All Might's POV, there's a young man laying on the floor. He looks alive. I hope. I'm not sure. I rush over to the young man after I bottle the slime villain and start slapping his face. Come on, come on. I mutter. With a gasp, the poor boy sits up and bonks his head with mine. His black hair looks green on closer glance and his clear green eyes widen as they take in me. I am here. I declare loudly. He flinches from something and then beams at me. I take in the 4 freckles on both sides of his face. The burns on his arms worries me. I better remember what he looks like, in case I ever need to report abuse. All Might. The boy exclaims and jumps to his feet. I am here. I declare again. He yelps and runs around me looking for something. With a sly grin, I pull his notebook from my pocket and show it to him. I am here. And I have signed your notebook. I exclaim. Oh my gods, Dash. The boy starts as he stares at his paper with goggling eyes. I turn away from the boy and start preparing for my jump to the police station. Wait, Dash, the boy says just as I do my last squat. I will now be going to turn in the villain. See you later, young man. I scream as I jump into the air. I zip safely through the air and make sure that the slime goo man, whatever it was still in my pocket. To us. But there was another green thing attached to my leg. Young man. I scream as we slowly lose altitude and fall towards a roof. That was why I couldn't jump as far. Well, that and my cough problem cough. I managed to safely land on the roof and grab the young man by his collar to lift him up to my eye level. He winces and flinches as I do so, and I take note of that. What do you think you're doing? I ask. We could have died. No, you could have died. What? I'm sorry. Sorry. The boy stammers. I just had to ask you something. What could be so important that you almost killed yourself and me? The #1 hero of Japan. The boy blushes and looks at me without really looking at me. I just wanted to ask if you thought that quirkless people could be heroes. I freeze and stare at him. Are you quirkless, my boy? No. He stammers and blushes. Just, my friend. He really wants to become a hero. But he's quirkless. Well then, I say. Tell that young man no. He can't be a hero. There's really no hope for him. The young man asks, his voice quivering. Even if it's his dream. It's too dangerous for quirkless people. They'll die or they'll be in the way of other heroes who have to wait up or save them. It's dangerous for others too. Tell your friend that he can dream. But tell him to remember to dream something that is attainable. I say, my voice finalizing everything. Now I must go and deliver this to dash. See intense cough. Izuku's POV. All Might was about to leave and deliver the villain to the police when he started coughing. But did he catch a cold? OMG, can a hero catch a cold? Can a pro #1 hero, my idol, All Might, catch a cold? Izuku's POV. Izuku had just asked his hero and his idol if quirkless people could be heroes. His hero had said no. Out of nowhere, Izuku's idol started coughing and hacking up BLD. Like a cat. What was going on? He hacked once more before there was a flash of smoke. Was it karma for saying no? For shooting down someone's dream? Izuku sadistically hoped so. Izuku blinked, trying to clear the air, all the while muttering, All Might. Are you okay? Did something happen? Did you catch a cold? As the smoke cleared in the winds, he sees a skinny man in the place of the great All Might. He's skinny, has blonde hair, electric blue eyes, and absolutely no meat or muscle on him. Izuku slowly backs away from him. Who are you? And what did you do with All Might? The man's voice is raspy and totally different from All Might as he sinks to the floor with his back on the railing. Relax, young man. The man says. How could he relax in a situation like this? Was this a joke? Was this man a scam? What about his dream of being a hero? Was he duped just like that? I am All Might. WhatIf? No, you can't be All Might. Izuku says with a frown. All Might isn't a skinny, weird-looking guy like you. He's strong, buff, and has saved so many people. He's my hero. I would know. And he wouldn't say things like, quirkless people shouldn't be heroes. Young man. The All Might says before coughing again. I am the real All Might. It's just that the public doesn't know about my real appearance. Imagine if they knew I was like this. What do you think would happen? You know, right? The world would be thrown out of the peace we have. There would be more villains. So you're always like this? Izuku asks. All Might nodded. It was because 5 years ago, I fought a man. It was a hard battle. He was a strong battle. He was strong. He had supporters. It was an intense battle. It was long. At the end I won the fight, of course, in the end, or you wouldn't see me here, but I was heavily injured. All Might lifted his shirt to show his scar on his abdomen. It was purple and dented inwards. Kind of gruesome if you ask Izuku. So you're like that? Izuku asks. Can you still be a hero? Can I still be a hero? The wound affected my body, but my quirk saved my hero career. I can still be a hero, but for a little amount of time per day now. I'm slowly losing my time limit. Soon I won't be able to be a hero anymore. And the world will lose this All Might. Izuku stares at his idol in shock and watches as the older man slowly stands up and returns to his buff form. Until then I'll continue being a hero. I'll never give up. You can still be a hero, huh? Even when you told me that I couldn't be a hero. Please keep this a secret. I know the public can't know about my situation. I can't let Japan and the world relapse into the dark times of before. You understand, right? If the world figures out about my condition, the villains, they'll gain confidence. They'll slowly return, more and more of them. He stares at Izuku and he nods. I'll be going now. All Might finishes accordingly. I have to return this to the police. Izuku continues staring in shock as his idol jumps away. Oh, but don't forget to tell your friend that he can't become a hero. He screams as he jumps away to the police station. He's back to his normal idiot self. Izuku stands there for a couple of more moments, staring in shock until he slumps down onto his knees. He said, I can't be a hero. Izuku stares out into the city blankly. Izuku grits his teeth and stands slowly back up. He existed all this way just for his idol to tell him that he couldn't achieve his dream. Why was he still here? Why couldn't he know? His idol, his former idol, was a hypocrite, saying that Izuku couldn't be a hero, that it was too dangerous. What and but? A beach might for sure. Just because Izuku didn't have a quirk didn't mean that he would die any easier. And just because All Might did have a quirk didn't mean that he would never die, especially with his condition that Izuku just found out. And for All Might to still say that Izuku couldn't be a hero. That it was too dangerous for quirkless people to become a hero infuriated Izuku. He would show no proof that anything was possible. That he could do it. His mother's voice tickles his ears. Aiza, don't ever give up on your dream. You have to believe that anything is attainable as long as you want to attain it. He grits his teeth. He would show them all. What it meant to be a hero. What it meant to never give up. What it meant when you let go of all rules. But might POV, I jumped my way to the police station and try not to regret what I had said to the boy on the roof. He looked so crushed. He was a good kid. I decided to care that much for his friend. I wonder who he was. What was his quirk? He looked like he had the drive and kindness to become a hero. I should have asked, or maybe pressured him into going to UA. After all, I would be a teacher there. Maybe he would be my student. .. Maybe my successor. But the boy had a quirkless friend. And that was unacceptable. It was better to distance yourself from quirkless people. They only brought trouble and weakness to others. Dragging down society like that. It was a disgrace. His quirkless friend would only drag that young man down to his doom. Away from the great heights he could have achieved. I understand though. I was quirkless once. But now I'm not, and I truly, I can understand how useless I was. How useless quirkless people are in general. I'm thankful that my MSTR helped me see this. She opened my eyes. Although I sometimes get the nagging feeling that wasn't what she wanted me to feel. I was right. Quirkless people were useless. Not helpful. I land at the entrance of the police station still deep in thought and then realize something as I dig around my pockets. The bottle. All Might's POV. I dropped the villain somewhere. Somewhere earlier. When I was jumping around. From the roof. When that boy clung on my leg. That wasn't the problem. What I needed to know was where it was now. It was dangerous. I don't want to think about what could be happening to the poor innocent civilians right now. They need my help. There's the familiar screech of sirens somewhere in the distance of the city, and with no better idea, I prepare to jump there. A small Naya could be heard behind me as I start to jump off towards the siren sounds. It was a police officer. Sansa. He was never noticed at all by the deep-in-thought hero. Or he was just plain ignored. Sansa didn't care though. He was glad that it was less work for him to do. I land barely making it to my location before my form gives out and I start coughing again. Into my hands, of course. There's a smear of BLD, but I wipe that off onto my dark breathes. Nobody can notice, right? I don't know what to do. I'm here. But what can I do? My limit was reached. I couldn't go back to my form anymore. I push through the crowd and stare with wide eyes at the spiky, blonde-haired teen that was struggling in the slime's grasp. The pros who have gathered are trying to attack the slime villain, but it has all fronts of attack covered. This was almost a hostage situation. Mampfwastfa comes from the boy as a small crackling sounds come from his palms. Was that his quirk? It was strong. But it wouldn't do anything against the slime. What do I do? What were the pros doing? All the civilians watching could clearly see that their attacks and tactics weren't working. We were all just standing here watching the boy slowly suffocate to death. What do I do? As I'm turning away debating whether to call for backup or to push my limit, I see a familiar green-haired kid push through the kid and start sprinting towards the slime and the villain. Izuku's POV. After Izuku's encounter with his ex-idol, he managed to get down from the roof. It was some sort of apartment complex, so that made it awkward, but he managed to get to the ground floor and started walking home. Izuku couldn't afford any more delays. He didn't want Mrs. to be waiting for so long. As Izuku walks home, he passes a large crossing and sees that the road is blocked off. By pulse, tape, a crowd, and were those pro-heroes. What in the world was going on? A fight? A battle? Between heroes and villains? On instinct, Izuku rushes over there and start pushing through the crowd, barely managing to get his analysis notebook out and preparing to take his notes. Except when he reaches the front, he freezes from surprise. It's that guy. No, Izuku decided. He really shouldn't decide people's genders like that. It was that thing, whatever it was. That slime Y thing from earlier. But didn't All Might have it in his pocket? What happened? It fell out, didn't it? But when, oh. It was him. It was his fault. When he was clinging onto All Might's leg waiting, the villain must have somehow fallen down. The pros weren't able to do anything and their attacks looked peeved and cautious. Was it a hostage situation? Like the situation Izuku was in earlier. Izuku scans the villain and realizes that the slime was holding onto something. A person who looked awfully familiar. Was it Bakugo? At that moment Bakugo lifted his head and his crimson-red eyes met Izuku's. Momfwastfa. Bakugo screams. Probably something along the lines of, "Beat it, shitty Deku. What are you looking at? I have this villain under control." But his eyes. Bakugo's eyes, they look like they're calling for help. And as much as Izuku wants to turn away, he can't. After all, being a hero means saving those that need it, right? It wasn't as difficult or complicated as people made it to be. You saved people. No matter who, no matter what they were. You saved people unconditionally. With that thought in mind, Izuku darts forward. Even though he's prepared of what he's about to do, he still feels the low swoop of his gut. His anxiety and nerves kicking in. Izuku forgot to make a plan. It didn't matter, he was already moving. His feet flying towards his tormentor. Both of them actually. One of them a bully and one of them a villain. Izuku throws his backpack and then desperately tries to think of the next step. Behind him, civilian and hero alike were calling him back. He tunes them out and tries his best to come up with a plan on the fly. Comics. Simon. He couldn't hold his form when he was mixed with water, right? So what if the same worked for this slime person? If Izuku was right, the villain had the ability to absorb things. So there. The area was a construction site and Izuku dearly wondered why the villain decided to attack Bakugo here. Maybe he was rudely dropped by an idiot hero and had no choice but to attack here. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. Izuku would use everything he had at his disposal to his advantage. With a swift turn from his charge, he darts to the sand pile and stops with a screech. There's a moment of silence as everyone wonders what the green-haired boy was going to do before there's an intake of drawn breath. They watch in awe as they see in slow motion as Izuku picks up a pile of sand in his hands and chucks it at the slime. It doesn't have to work, Izuku thought. Just to scare the villain and distract it. That small amount of sand would have no impact on the villain. But it's enough. Enough for Bakugo to twist free and for the heroes to close in. Within seconds the pros finish off the fight and has managed to capture the villain. Bakugo is slumped, unconscious, on the floor. He couldn't breathe a single full breath for minutes. He couldn't hold on to reality anymore, and once he managed to break free he had fallen on his face, passing out. The media team closed in on the incident too, filming a video of Bakugo being wheeled into an ambulance by paramedics. Just as they start taking a panorama video and Izuku manages to frantically motion to the camera crew that he didn't want to be shown on TV. He's worried that they won't get the message, but out of some pocket of kindness in the crew's heart they manage to avoid him. He was glad. Izuku walks towards where Bakugo and the villain were and pick up his backpack. Just as he turns around he sees the face of Pro Hero, Death Arms, Mount Lady, and 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲. Izuku flinches as they close in on him like a pack of woods and he braces himself to be reprimanded for his rash behavior. He deserved it after all. Izuku's POV. Izuku holds his backpack limply in his arms as he waits to be reprimanded by the three pro heroes in front of him for his rash actions. Nobody moves as each side eyes each other warily. Maybe the pros were nervous because he was quirkless. Did they even know he was quirkless? Death Arm finally breaks into an easy grin and says, "Great courage out there, my friend. You helped us change the tide of the fight." Mount Lady flashes a flirtatious smile at Izuku and whispers, "Your quirk is so cool. It makes you so smart. Your quirk does have something to do with your intelligence, right?" Izuku flushes because he's a pure and innocent sweet cinnamon roll. Of course he knew that Mount Lady couldn't help it. That was just the way she was. Though what she said, 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐴 just stands there woodenly and stares straight ahead. As helpful as that was, I must say that it was quite dangerous. Many thanks, however. Izuku freezes as his mind processes everything that was happening to him. He wasn't in trouble, but Quirk. He just used finite logic in his brain to get himself out of trouble. A quirk can only get you so far. And when you're quirkless you have to act smart or you're going to be killed. He doesn't know what to say to the pro's praises though. What would he say? What would someone with a quirk their entire life and was comfortable with it say? Izuku stammers. Well, that's great. Now they think I have a quirk. IQ or something. Thanks, yeah, I mean you're welcome. The heroes smile and clap his back. With that quirk, my man, you can become a great hero. Death Arm says before he leaves back to their headquarters. Izuku keeps his bright smile pasted on until they leave and then he slowly starts to walk home, towards the orphanage. As he gets farther and farther from the crime site, resentment fills his heart and his smile slowly drops. He was outright disgusted. If those heroes had found out that he was quirkless, Izuku could 100% guarantee that he wouldn't have been spoken to like that. Now he knew. Now he understood what the heroes were really like. He now understands what having a quirk lets you experience in life. As Izuku turns the corner of the suburban area in Tokyo aiming for his home when a voice calls out to him from behind. A familiar voice. All Might's POV young man. I call out as I round the corner. The green hair boy had sped up earlier and in my current form I had trouble keeping up. The boy pauses and looks back at me before ducking his head in respect. Izuku's POV anger. That's the only emotion he was feeling. He needed to get home or else dash. But no, these events, these idiot heroes and idiot villains. They were blocking his way home, making him late. This far from his school, from his tormentor, his instinctive acting, his defense and coping skill was lowered and he was unguarded. Midoriya Izuku was back to his usual snarky, sassy self. The innocence was a self-defense system for him, against his tormentors and the world. Rule hashtag never show them what you're capable of. Rule hashtag suppress. Repress. Regress. Yes, All Might. Izuku says as he lowered his head in respect and to hide the dark flash of his eyes. I'm so happy to see you again. He releases a sweet laugh before All Might says anything more. Izuku cuts in and lays his fanboy on a bit thick. Imagine meeting my hero and idol of so many years twice in a day. A dream come true. You can go F yourself. Was what he was actually thinking. All Might opens his mouth and before he even starts talking, Izuku feels annoyed. He ducks his head again to hide the anger and disdain written on his face. You did well, young man. You showed me what I'm fighting for. You inspired me to work hard. I'll fight for you guys. I'll fight for the next generation of heroes. All Might beams. That fight was well strategized. I'm impressed by your quirk. So intelligent. Izuku rolled his eyes mentally and thought. Did you ever consider that people could actually do things quirkless? Just no way. Quirkless people aren't as noob and useless as you thought. Thanks, Izuku stammers. You inspired me dash. Since you're so smart I came to tell you something. No, to advise you something. All Might seriously says, I want you to enroll into UA and become a hero. I believe that you can become a hero. A great one. Bruh. All Might isn't done and he continues, and I want you to stop hanging out with that quirkless friend of yours. He will only hold you back from your full potential. He'll drag you down if not backwards. Izuku sees red for a moment before he takes a deep breath and put years of acting innocent and sweet to practice. He stammers in a practiced way, I'll think about it. After all, he is my friend. I can't abandon him like that. In reality though, Izuku was thinking that his ex-idol was spilling a load of dipshit to his ears. Then Izuku smiles. Maybe I'll get my friend to enroll in UA with me. We'll go together. I'm sure if he was the one to do it, he could become a hero even though he's quirkless. All Might frowns and Izuku smirks mentally. Perfect. No, there's no way that dash. All Might starts and Izuku's eyes narrow before widening again in an innocent, pure way. I'll tell him that he can prove people wrong. That a quirkless kid can become a hero. I'll tell him I believe in him. Izuku continues with his delusional, fakely happy facade. He ignored whatever All Might was saying before him. Something about quirkless people not being able to be a hero. Whatever, nobody really asked for his opinion this time. All Might continues frowning and Izuku turns on his heel before walking away. I'll be working at UA this year. All Might finally says. So if you want to apply then I'll be glad to be your teacher. In fact I'll be honored to be able to raise such a bright mind up to such great hero lengths. How do you know I'll pass? Izuku asks. All Might smiles and booms. I just have the feeling that you're going to be an amazing hero. All Might lets out a boisterous laugh before shouting, I am going to leave like a normal person. Izuku stays there for a couple more moments and as he hears All Might's footsteps recede in the distance he whispers to himself, yeah of course I'm going to be an amazing hero. I've already passed all those heroes. All those heroes who save people. What are they going to save? When they can't even save themselves. When they can't even encourage and inspire when people are at the lowest of their lows. No, I'm already a pretty amazing person. That much I can tell. But I'll show you. I'll be the best hero you've ever seen. And we'll see who's laughing when you learn I'm quirkless. Izuku's POV. Izuku has finally managed to reach the orphanage without any more trouble from a bunch of idiots and such. He takes a good look at the goth-like exterior of the tall orphanage before he walks up the walkway to the small porch. The orphanage was easy to find. If you care ABT details and such, here it is. In the neighborhood of 1 to 2 story buildings, seeing a 3-story building definitely put the orphanage out of place. All the buildings next to the orphanage, going in any direction, had the modern vibe going, and then you look at the orphanage and with its dark wood and goth vibe, it looked out of place. Not to mention the occasionally boarded windows, you could say that the orphanage stood out. With a creak the door opens into a warm foyer. A complete contrast to the outside exterior, the orphanage on the inside was warm and had a home-y feeling. Izuku stands on the doormat for a couple of moments before he takes off his shoes and step up into his house. Hearing the door open, Mrs. appears at the top of the 2nd-story staircase. She has a wooden cane in hand and a disgruntled look on her face. The cane taps in front of her as she walks down the steps unsteadily. She reaches the foyer and hobbles towards Izuku. She's a short, wrinkled figure with white hair and glassy eyes that couldn't see a thing. With a well-aimed move of her cane, Mrs. manages to smack Izuku on the side of his head. Get ready for dinner, she rasps and looks or tries to sternly at the green-haired boy before her. But she breaks into a worried, but kind grin. I can't believe you worried me like that. Coming home that late. Was it those boys again? If so, bring them here. I'll tell them off. I'll tell them to stop bothering you. Izuku dash, I know. Izuku mutters, I'll stand up for myself. And I'm sorry for worrying you, it's just today was a long day dash. That's no excuse, young man. Mrs. snaps, I was worried that something happened to you like last time. I thought you'd been re-kidnapped by your previous foster parents. Do you know how worried I was? I'm sorry. Izuku says meekly, staring down at his feet. His foster parents, huh? Those assholes. Flashback. Izuku's hand was being held by a tall young lady. No, not being held. It was being grasped. And he was being dragged to this couple's car. They had come for him this time at the orphanage. He was surprised. He had been at the orphanage for 6 months only. He was still 4 and it had been 6 months since his mother had died and he was left all alone in the cruel, harsh world. In those 6 months nobody yet had wanted a quirkless and he knew his chances of getting adopted were very slim. Quirkless weren't useful in the world. But just this morning, Mrs. had knocked on his door and had told him that a couple was here to adopt him. He had been surprised, and he was still wary. The tall woman whose name was Aubrey, she has auburn hair and black eyes, continued dragging him back to their old, black car. He had been stuck in that orphanage for so long, being homeschooled by a not yet blind Mrs. that he couldn't even tell what brand it was. The man, whose name was Tom, he was a plain-looking man with short brown hair and brown eyes. Was wearing a suit and he opened the backseat door open for Aubrey to throw Izuku into the backseat. Buckle up, she said with a dark smile. Tom next opened the door for her. While she got into the car, Izuku overheard him whisper to her, "Do you think this one will work for Dash?" "Should Dash," the woman hisses as she slams the door closed shut herself. Tom rolled his shoulders. From Izuku's young eyes they were either a very bad couple, or they weren't a couple at all. Well, that wasn't his problem. Tom got into his car himself and with a warm smile at Izuku, he said, Are you ready for your fate? He got smacked by Aubrey and shut up with a frown. The car pulled out of the driveway in front of the orphanage and Izuku turned around in his seat to see his home one more time. Mrs. was standing there with a concerned face. He watches as she pulls a phone out of her pocket and with her black hair twisted around one finger and green eyes narrowed in concentration, she started talking on the phone. Mrs. is younger. You'll see why she aged so much later. Izuku sat back down in the car and Aubrey shot a look back at him. Kid, put your seatbelt on. You can't die. Yet. The adults had a real laugh out of that one. Izuku watches the traffic and other flash by. This was his first time of the house this month and since he rarely got to go out, he watches in amazement as everyone seemed to have an operating life. The car continued driving through the city until they turned down a road. Izuku knew this road. This was a no-no road. Mrs. told him that this road wasn't safe. Why were they here? The car starts towards a warehouse and Izuku wonders if he's living there. It would be fun. He thinks, he's not sure, just trying to convince himself. With a screech Tom parks and Aubrey gets out of the car in a flash. Izuku's door click opens and Aubrey reaches in, her manicured nails twisted like claws as they clasp onto the young boy's right arm for a moment before she drags him out of the car. Come on, she says motioning to Tom, let's deliver this boy to the boss and then leave. Izuku stares in wonder, completely silent as the couple leads him into one of the warehouse's smaller entrance. At first glance it looks like your typical warehouse with boxes everywhere, stacked high one upon each other. But if Izuku thinks about it, it seems more like a maze. Something to keep him trapped here inside. But that's just his imagination playing him right. His mind was gaslighting him. The couple leading him take a couple more confusing turns, each of them flanking Izuku. It's a couple of minutes before he sees an end. With a suppressed giggle he awaits to see what awaits him. As the end of the maze of boxes comes, Izuku could see what was there in the small, clear space. A chair. Izuku's POV 4 years old continuing the flashback from the previous chapter, he didn't know why there was a chair. And what a suspicious-looking chair it was. There was a bunch of wires hooked up to the chair. Or in general just floating around. Izuku knew he shouldn't be feeling this way, since such nice people had finally adopted him, but still. Izuku didn't feel safe here. Was he just being foolish? Aubrey looks at him and then squats down at him to look him in the eyes. You're a smart kid, right? She asks and Izuku nods. She stands back up and looks at Tom. They both smile at the same time in agreement before Tom this time squats in front of Izuku. Izuku dash. Tom starts and then pauses. How about this? We want you to sit in the chair. We want to give you a test, to see how smart you are. We want to see how much we need to teach you, or how many grades you need to pass before you can start your new school. Izuku, not knowing better, just nods. He didn't need an explanation. He just hopes this couple will love him like Mrs. does. With a happy smile, Tom stands up and walks with Izuku the last remaining steps to the chair. Up close the chair looked especially frightening. Swallowing down his fear, Izuku steps on a little step to boost himself up into the leather chair. Think the one you see in dentist's office, but it's not lowered back. Ah, you've arrived, a new voice says, and a portly middle-aged man appears from the shadows. He has a pair of thick, circular spectacles covering his face and sported a mustache. But that was the only hair that could be found on his head. Tom, Aubrey, you may go. With a nod, the two leave the clearing and head back into the maze. From where Izuku is sitting, he can see them give a childish high five to each other. Izuku continues sitting on the chair and watches the portly man walk around him. The man mutters, I see. He starts attaching the wires to Izuku and Izuku's round eyes widen even further. He starts to struggle, but the man brings a metal clasp over his stomach and attaches it to the other side of the chair. Izuku hadn't seen that when he'd approached the chair. His feet are locked up next and then his neck. His arms were lying next to his sides and are already under the tight metal clasp that covered his torso. The portly man that must have been a doctor starts humming as he continues to hook Izuku up to wires. Before long he's inserted in 4 into Izuku's arm. All right. The man announces to seemingly no one, but a voice responds from someone in the room. No, it was a computer on one of the corners of the table that rested near the wall, near Izuku's chair. Very well. The other man, not the doctor, says, "You may begin. Report back by tomorrow with your results. If he doesn't die." Izuku freezes. Die. The doctor man cackles and puts a mask over his face. He slides into a scrub and with a deafening snap. The doctor grabs a new needle with an unknown fluid inside and prepares it to plunge it into Izuku's arm. There's a sting and a clenching pain where the needle entered and then nothing. Slowly he feels the seat beneath him heating up until it's overbearingly hot. "Sorry," the doctor apologizes, "I just need your BLD to flow faster. I need you to either die faster or don't." Izuku starts sweating and then that's when the real pain starts. On top of the heated chair to the point where it's almost burning, the doctor started pushing a button on his remote. There's small pulses of electric shocks buzzing through Izuku's body. Izuku could feel his BLD flowing faster and faster. And as the liquid injected into his BLD stream started to move through his body, that's when he feels it. Something's ripping his body apart. Something is ripping his mind apart. It's tearing him up from the inside. Cell by cell. Splitting him apart only to place something in its stead. What was it leaving behind? But then he feels that being destroyed too. What were they doing to him? The pain ceases for a moment and Izuku lays there breathing. He won't scream. He won't say a thing. Was this what the real world like? The doctor watches on with a curious expression and starts taking notes on his clipboard. The pain starts again. The heat. The electricity. He can feel the pain. Everywhere. Everywhere and nowhere at once. Izuku's body was being overflooded with information. His neurons couldn't keep up. His pain receptors were being fried. But they were back. The pain, the heat, the splitting, the buzz, it was all back and Izuku had to sit there and endure it all. The doctor frowns. Things were looking interesting. He grabs another needle with the same fluid on the inside and rushes over to Izuku's side. Time was of the essence. With a jab and a push down on the plunger, Izuku feels the liquid entering his body again. There's a calm, where he feels nothing, before it comes raging back. Stronger than before. So much stronger than before. Now it felt like his cells were ripping themselves in half and then ripping a half of that. And then this liquid was stitching them back up before ripping them again. This continues for the rest of the day. The whole night. Over and over and over and over and over. The doctor is pleased. Izuku is loosing it. His hair is slowly turning white. Already a quarter of his locks were white. This continues the next day. And the next. All day, all night. More white hair. More pain. The next. The next. The next. The next. A new needle. Another. 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 More of that liquid. It's been a week. The doctor has made a breakthrough. This would be the last couple days needed. There's a tap on the doctor's shoulder and he whirls around irritated. Who is bothering him at a time like this? It's her. Izuku's POV 4 years old still flashback. Izuku was passed out from all the pain. They were taking a break from his own personal torture when the doctor was tapped on the shoulder. Her POV, a week prior. Some couple had come to her orphanage asking to adopt a kid. She had told them of all the kids she had. They wanted the quirkless one, they had said. She was suspicious. But, she asked. They wanted to show him what true love was. What the world was really like. To let him experience a normal childhood. She was suspicious. But she agreed. Sign here, she said. And they had. They had paid and she had went up to get Izuku. Knocking on his door before entering, she walks to the boy's side and shook him awake. Mrs. P. A week earlier. Mrs. had let her know Izuku wasn't her son. Even though she did think of him like one. But she had let him go with that villainous couple. Orders from above. Some hero had infiltrated a large villain group and had told the commission's office that they were going to Mrs. Orphanage for an quirkless kid. All she had to do was give up her boy to them and place a tracker on Izuku before they left. That was easy enough. She just didn't understand how hard it would be to watch her boy part from her. To hand him over to the villains. She watches as they drag Izuku to her car and yeet him into the back seat. Mrs. sees him turn around and wave at her before they drive off. She didn't know what would happen to him. All the commission's office had told her was that the villain group was coming for Izuku. She didn't think they knew what the villains were going to do either. Izuku's green head slowly disappears from view and she pulls out her secure, work phone. Dialing the commission's office, she waits for the other side to pick up. Hello. The head of the commission office says. Hello. They have the boy and I have the tracker. Mrs. says. There's a buzz and a click before the voice comes back on. We understand. Thank you. Stand on standby and report locations every hour. Mrs. nods in understanding. She heads back inside the orphanage and starts waking the other kids up. Today was going to be a long day. Minutes later, she checks the tracker. Its green screen was showing a map and a red blinking dot at a location. Where was that? It was too fast, she couldn't tell what the exact location was. The dot stops blinking and then disappears. What had happened? In a frantic rush, she ushers the children outside into the backyard and warns them not to wander too far. Hello. The head of the commission says again after Mrs. called them. The tracker's dead. She tells them. There's an intake of breath from the other side before the voice crackles through. Last known location. Somewhere slightly north of Tokyo. Towards the slums. Mrs. tells them. We understand. We will use that information and the hero's information on the villain's bases to triangulate his position. How fast can you find him? Mrs. asks frantically. She didn't know what they were doing to her boy. He could be getting tortured right now for all she knew. It may take a while. We still have to patrol and set up watches near that area. Please stand on standby until called. The voice says, not giving away any more information. There's a click from the other end and the call ends. With a grunt of frustration, Mrs. slams her fist into the wall. Her poor boy. Time skip. It had taken 6 more days of scouting the location and planning before they could go retrieve Izuku. The commission had triangulated the warehouse's position on the first day and had sent out scouts and patrols near the building. Indeed, they saw the couple entering and exiting often. The commission was able to secure a search warrant and backup from the police too in the next 5 days. At last they had a plan and were able to move. Everyone had gathered in front of the warehouse right now. Pros of all different backgrounds were there. Who knew what sort of villain lay inside? Eraserhead, Endeavor, Hawks, Mirko, those were some of the bigger heroes. She was hero too. An undercover hero, but this was her boy. She had to help. Mrs. Quirk, she could make her enemies, anything, AI, animals, humans, etc. blank out. They wouldn't be able to think, no thought process for 3 seconds. But then she has to blink and then they regain their immune to her quirk for the next 3 minutes. It works on anyone within a 3-meter radius as long as she can see all of them. Drawbacks: the 3-minute cooldown and the fact that she had to be pretty close to them. With police covering their backs, Hawks went ahead and slowly cut down the door's hinges. With his thinnest feather that slips through the crack on top of the door, he's able to push the door forward and into the arms of the awaiting hero, Endeavor. Did that make sense? The pros all rushed inside and stared in shock all around. Mrs.'s earlier thoughts were right. It was indeed a maze. Hawks desperately wanted to fly around the warehouse, but he didn't want to get spotted. Who knows how close Izuku and the villain were to the heroes? Instead, Eraserhead jumped around on top of all the stacked boxes, signaling that it was clear. The rest of the heroes followed him. They managed to make it through the maze with only a couple of backtracks. As they got closer, they jumped up on top of the stacked boxes too. Everyone hid in the shadows and looked at the clearing. Nothing would prepare them for the sight they would see. No years of experience would prepare them for the sight before their eyes. All the heroes were perched on top of the boxes at this point. All eyes were on the clearing where Izuku sat on the chair. All eyes were on the doctor and Izuku. He wasn't out yet. Izuku was still very much awake. The sight before them sickened all the heroes. Izuku was on the chair. His hair was dark, blocked by all the shadows overcasting his face. They saw the doctor humming to himself as he prepared the next needle. Nobody could move as they watched the doctor jam the needle into Izuku's arm. The remote buttons are fiddled with next and the heat and electricity pulses are turned on. The doctor takes notes as the liquid takes effect. Izuku's pain receptors and neurons are long dead and can no longer process the pain from heat and the electric D, but every time, he can feel the liquid slowly tear him apart on the inside. Each time the pain is greater and less at the same time. Something was messing with his brain. There was something there lurking in the shadows of Izuku's brain. He lets out a scream. Please stop. His voice and throat can barely form the words. Please. He always asks, no matter how much it hurt. Izuku had given up hope days ago. He knew instinctively after this that he would never trust anyone ever again. Not after that couple brought him here. But still, was there hope that this man would? He coughs as the pain lessens and BLD splatters his shirt and the floor. The heroes watch stricken as the doctor, instead of stopping, increases the heat and the voltage, and the liquid goes into effect again. Izuku's own body was trying to kill him. There's no amount of screaming that will help Izuku with his pain. He doesn't try anymore. I thought. Izuku coughs again as a rare moment of peace comes and the liquid stops trying to tear his body apart and piece it back together. The heroes lean forward in their shadows. They need to hear this boy's words. Even if something, maybe fate, was keeping them from moving, they were still enraptured by his words. Whatever was happening to this boy, they didn't want to think about it. Izuku starts again. I thought the heroes were supposed to save people. You would have come to save me by now. Izuku coughs and slowly looses his hold on reality and conscious as the doctor lets out a maniacal chuckle. His recovery time is getting less and less. The tests are working on him. The Quirk is getting used to him. No. He's getting used to the Quirk. Before long I'll have him shred this. The doctor says with a self-satisfied grin, a couple more days and then he'll be perfect. The perfect masterpiece. The heroes, still shocked by the poor boy's words, could only understood a couple words from the seemingly random sentences that streamed out from the doctor's mouth. Only Mrs. could focus. If you would even call it that. Green eyes flashing with anger, she drops down stealthily to the floor and walks towards the doctor. Nobody stops her. They understand. They can't. With light steps she sneaks up to the doctor and taps his shoulder. Who are you? The bald man asks as he slowly turns around. Stop bothering me now. Mrs. throws a punch at the bald man's face and surprisingly for his size, he's able to dodge quickly. Heroes. The man wails. Why must you come now when I'm so close to a breakthrough? That boy is under my watch, you Fing son of a beach. Mrs. spits and her eyes narrow. She activates her quirk and watches as the man's eyes go blank, not able to think. The heroes nod at her and quickly get ready to attack, but before the 3 seconds are over, before even the fastest hero, Hawks, can land a hit in, the portly man swipes at Mrs. Eyes. With a knife. She's not prepared. She never expected this. It wasn't her fault. The BLD splatters as Mrs. sees BLD red and then dark cover her vision. She can't see. Someone screams. And then silence. There's silence from both sides as her quirk wears off. The silence is broken by the doctor's mad cackling. I see. Your quirk really had something to do with your eyes, didn't it? The portly man boisters a chuckle. What an interesting quirk. Mrs. lets out a screech of agony before she stumbles back and passes out, her BLD puddling beneath her hair. Her BLD is the same color as her hair. The rest of the heroes quickly recover and rush in to throw punches, kicks, and whatever fighting method they had. They needed to use her sacrifice to their advantage. To save the kid that she had loved so much. Why did they think that she was dead anyways? The knife was a small butter knife. It wouldn't have stabbed her brain and killed her. She was bleeding out. As the heroes attack, they're caught off guard as they see the doctor dodge every single attack. No matter how fast, no matter how strong. When Eraserhead finally manages to get his sights on the doctor and his quirk activates, lifting his hair and eyes glowing red, they all watch in shock as they see the man slowly squish down into a muddy puddle. Remember that this doctor was able to recreate quirks into Nomus, and even though this is 5 years early, he has a prototype with twice as quirk because plot reasons. This doctor was a fake. There's a clamor and uproar as all the heroes realize what had happened. Hawks rushes over to Mrs. side and tries his best to help her even though his medical knowledge was lacking. What shocks him is as Mrs. bleeds out from her eyes. Her hair color bleeds out too, and her eyes, which would have scarred but they don't even get the chance to scar, they turn cloudy and heal slightly immediately. Mrs. had a secret. Her hair would turn white if her body were to ever suffer severe trauma, and it would heal her a little bit. Just so that she won't die. Hence why in the current day POV her hair is white and eyes cloudy. It was a backup plan. She's not completely blind. But Izuku doesn't know that. Hawks and Endeavor, who was just standing there watching, not sure how to help the other useless shitty heroes out as he puts it, both gasp in surprise as they see Mrs. rise and then immediately rush over to Izuku. The remaining heroes had split into two groups. One group would retrieve Izuku and one to explore and confiscate the whole warehouse. The first group approaches Izuku cautiously and then stand in shock with their mouths open, Aizawa included, as Mrs. pushes through them, her eyesight fuzzy. She launches herself at Izuku and shakily try to get him free. She can't see too well though. A number of the heroes gently pry her away and tell her to calm down. Tell her that they would get him out, to trust them. She resists, obviously. Aizawa ignored the useless idiots who were calming down Mrs. and secured Izuku himself. He managed to unlock and unhook the poor boy from the chair. As he laid the kid on the floor, and from the brief moment he was in contact with the kid, Aizawa could sort of sense the bare minimum of damage and pain the kid really was in. Although passed out, his body continued twitching from the aftershocks of the electric shocks. His body was burned in multiple places. He had lost a lot of weight even with the 4 in his arm that Aizawa had removed earlier. There were BLD covering his arms everywhere from all the needles. And Aizawa couldn't see but rather feel that on Izuku's neck, legs, parts of his arm, and if he was guessing right, torso were the imprints of the metal band that kept him secured to the chair. That was the bare minimum. Izuku was in a lot of pain. After the all-clear sign, the paramedics scurried in and managed to get the kid and Mrs. out back towards their ambulance. Aizawa follows them outside, and under the sunlight is when he truly sees the most obvious sign of trauma on the young boy. Izuku's hair color is dash green. Izuku's POV still like 10 years ago when he was. It's the aftermath of the incident though. He's 14 now. Izuku was drowning in the dark. He couldn't see anything, feel anything, hear anything, move anything. All he could tell was that he was in his head, as per the norm and usual. But this time he couldn't feel his body. He couldn't move his body. There was only him, a phantom figure in his own mind. It was rather dark in here. Pretty empty too. Was he in the wrong room or something? Separate from all the memories and emotions. Something to keep him entertained at least. But it was kind of comforting to be here in the silence and the dark, especially after all the pain, all the heat, all the light, all the searing pain in his body. But he didn't know where that pain came from. He couldn't remember. Then there's the problem of something. A light something. No, someone was trying to wake him up. If he was being honest to himself, he didn't want to wake up. It was better down here in the dark. He felt understood. He felt home. He felt safe. But the light was insistent, and so Izuku was slowly drawn out of the dark crevice he was in back to the world. He guessed it was better than staying down here and not being able to remember anything. Except the phantom pain. But from what? Mrs. POV Izuku was laying on the bed and she was holding his hand. She could faintly see that he had just blinked. Or was that just a hallucination? When was the last time she'd slept? No, it wasn't a hallucination. He had blinked and just now she felt his finger twitch. No matter how uncertain she was on her own eyesight, she could trust her touch. What? Was he dying? Or was he waking up? After an almost whole 2 months. Izuku's POV Izuku woke up in a hospital. In a bed. In a blue hospital gown. In a bright white room with a beeping machine to his side. There's a prickling sensation in his arms. Was that a needle? With a large gasp, without thinking, Izuku started pulling it out. It popped out with a small trickle of BLD. He doesn't feel the pain, just checks all over his body. There's more. He keeps pulling them until they're all out. He doesn't know why. What caused him to act like this? Izuku. Mrs. Voice calls out. She wasn't waiting for a response, but when she walks into the room she blurrily sees Izuku sitting there in his hospital bed. Hey! Izuku tries. She screams. Did he do something wrong? Izuku wonders. And why were her eyes like that? No, it was just an overjoyed scream. Nurses rush into the room and start coming over to Izuku's side, when they see the pulled out needles they freeze. How should they proceed? What do they do with a traumatized kid like this? How do they treat him? Mrs. gives them a look and they leave the room. Message received. She would talk to him first and see what he remembered. Figure out how to proceed. Mrs. Izuku asks, "What am I doing here? Aren't I supposed to be with my foster parents? Aubrey and Tom. The last thing I remember is taking the stairs down to go greet the. What happened?" Mrs. freezes. What should she tell him? Choosing her words carefully, she finally decides on what to say. "Izuku," she starts and takes a deep breath before walking over unsteadily. She can't see too well to his side and sitting on the chair that's placed there. She grabs his hands and squeezes tight. He squeezes back. She almost breaks down crying. "Izuku, you went with your foster parents," she says and then pauses. Should she tell him he tripped? No. He would still at the least have memories of tripping down the stairs. "You went with your foster parents. And you spent a week with them." She looks into his clear green eyes. He smiles. "Were they nice to me?" No. His smile falls. "They weren't good people. They hurt you, Izuku. You were with them for a week. They hurt you really badly. We only found out about 1.5 months ago. The heroes saved you and brought you here. You were in a coma." "But Izuku started. "Why can't I remember anything then?" "It's the trauma," a doctor says. Nobody had heard him enter the room. Izuku instinctively flinches away from the doctor. Something about the scrub/uniform of the doctors was scaring him. He didn't know why. No, he couldn't remember why. And why were Mrs. eyes like that? Why didn't the adults just give him a chance to ask more questions? "I'm Dr. Tsukishima. The trauma made you forget. Or your brain to protect your body? It hid away whatever happened to you." But no, that wasn't true. Izuku could remember. He could remember some things. There were definitely knives involved. And needles. And a dentist chair. What was Mrs. hiding from him? His eyes narrow in suspicion before they relax. He would trust them for now. After all, he knew how tricky the human mind was. Something about him, it felt older. But it felt right. As if some part of him knew that it could no longer remain young. His mind had matured. Not that he knew why. He looks around his hospital room once more. The sliding door that the doctor had come through was slightly ajar and Izuku could tell that he was on the first or second floor. There was a small tree outside his window. His room was bare except for the bed, table, 2 chairs, and a desk with the doctor's computer on it. The table had an apple. The doctor followed his gaze to the apple and smiled at him. "Do you want the apple?" Izuku stopped. Did he want the apple? He wasn't hungry, but, "I'll cut it for you," the doctor says. Izuku nods and watches as the doctor picks up the plate and there's a small fruit knife that was hidden from his view. He watches as the doctor slowly peels and slices the apples for him. His head hurt. Really hurt. It felt like it was splitting in half. Trying to sabotage me again. Thinks. Where did he get that thought? With a small groan, he grabs his heads in his hands. Mrs. who was staying silent but who was holding on to Izuku's hands gasps in alarm as Izuku releases her hand and clutches at his head. The doctor turns around from where he's cutting the apple and looks back in concern. What was going on? A small scene was playing itself out in Izuku's mind. He just wanted to eat the apple and ask Mrs. questions. Why? Izuku's POV, a flashback in a flashback, all still 4 years old. A small scene was playing itself out in Izuku's mind. He was back in a room. No, not a room. It was a building, a warehouse. To Izuku this place felt familiar. He just couldn't put his finger on why. More like he couldn't remember. Izuku tried to get up, off that chair he was sitting on, and found that he couldn't move. When he looked down at himself, he almost choked with surprise. He was tied down to the chair, multiple needles sticking out of his arms. Was this where his recent fear of dentist chairs and needles come from? No, it couldn't be. This was just his brain trying to trick him. There was no one near him. Where was everyone? Couldn't they come back? Keep him company at least. Tell him what was going on. Izuku can't do anything in the past though. He can only watch with dull blank eyes as a pair of figures slowly appear from the shadows. What was with all the boxes around him? Some sort of science experiment perhaps. If so, what was he doing here? Was this a memory? an imagination. The pair of figures slowly strode forward towards the Izuku, and once both of them step out into the light, Izuku can see their faces. There's a tall, willowy woman on the right of a plain, average-looking man. The woman had auburn hair and black eyes while the man still looked pretty average. Average build, no outstanding features. Why was he? Why wasn't he at Aubrey's and Tom's house? Or were these people his foster parents? Aubrey, that was believable, she did have red hair. If so, her parents were really unoriginal people. Tom. A plain name for a plain man. He didn't know why he was thinking like this. These people could be completely different people. Who dash? His voice wouldn't work, and he had to try a couple more times before he could properly ask, "Who are you guys?" "We're Tom and Aubrey." Aubrey says with a sick smile. "Your foster parents. Why am I here?" He asks after some more stuttering. As you could tell, he was developing his habit of muttering and stuttering here. "Well dash," Tom says average ly. Seriously, everything about this man was normal. "We're not actually your foster parents." He says, "We changed our name and faked our identities." Izuku mentally rolled his eyes. He had thought that much as soon as he'd woken up here. But this was just a dream, right? So did that mean they were kidnappers? He was muttering. He was going insane. Were they villains? No, villains wouldn't come and talk to their prisoners, right? And did prisoners even keep prisoners? And if so, why a 4-year-old quirkless boy like him? He was useless after all. "You're here to be experimented on." A man's voice comes from behind Izuku's chair where he can't see, and a hand pats his fluffy hair. The man walks around the chair and Izuku can see a doctor. Oh, his fear, the coat. Oh dash. The man had somehow understood his mumbling. Well, that much was obvious. The doctor did spend the whole day with Izuku. But, Aubrey says with a maniacal smile, "Today we're not here for that." "Yeah." Tom shouts. The doctor sighs, "I'm sorry about this, my boy. I was hoping I could test on you unscathed, but these two idiots asked to try something and I have to find a way to pay them back. Plus, I do need a sample of you." "Stop talking," Aubrey says as she moves forward and shoves the doctor away. "I'll be going," he says as he leaves. "I have a weak stomach for torturing people. I couldn't bear to watch." "Hypocrite." Some other mental part screamed. "You tortured me every day." "Lies." "Shut up." Aubrey smiles as she goes to the table on the side of his chair, the one with AFO's computer on it, and grabs a knife that's prepared there. "How much were we allowed again?" she asks Tom as she licks her knife. "We're allowed about 4 liters of his BLD weight." Izuku stared at both of them in shock as Tom stands back and watches as Aubrey gets closer to Izuku. There's a small slice as she slowly carves a piece of his arm off. For a moment his body stiffens as if prepared for the pain, but then it relaxes. There's no pain. Just the sight of a piece of his arm in the lady's arm was slightly disgruntling. "Slightly. The doctor needs this," she says with an unhappy smile. "Oh, you're so cute, Izuku." She throws the whole bloody mess to Tom and he catches it. With an offhanded sigh, Tom slides that thing into a small container and seals it. Sorry, Aubrey, once you're done with the BLD, can I borrow him for a moment? I want to get some measurements in." What was going on? Was he at Red Cross or something? Izuku was really confused. Did the guy had to get his measurements for clothes? What was going on? "It's fine, do it before I go, maybe it'll be better," Aubrey exclaims as she tucks the knife onto her waistband. Aubrey and Tom switched places, with Aubrey cradling the container with part of his arm in it, before she places it down on the floor and refocuses on Izuku. Tom had approached Izuku and out of nowhere he pulled out a measuring tape. What the dash? Izuku thought. Seriously, could someone tell him what was going on? He was so confused. Why was his brain tricking him like this? Did it really like this kind of sick joke? After Tom puts his measuring tape away and backed off, Aubrey came back. "What?" Izuku's unflashback mind screamed. "You're back for more." Aubrey had instead grabbed a needle from her waist and plunged it into his arm. He had instinctively tensed, some reflex rising from somewhere deep within him. If he could have moved, he would have slapped her. Aubrey was slowly drawing his BLD into a small container she kept to her belt and back. It was clever if he thought about it. Whatever her quirk was probably had to do with BLD, and so that needle with a tube and container attached to it, to drain BLD, was clever. He was mumbling again. Aubrey had finished drawing. For liters of his BLD, and the doctor had come back from watching in the corner. Why does he have a chunk of skin missing? The doctor asked, and the two adults gulped. Tom started. I'll fix it, Aubrey said. There had been multiple tools from where she had grabbed the knife from earlier on. Make sure to tuck it back onto her waist. She headed over there and grabbed a metal rod that would heat up to unbearable heat. With a small squelch, she pressed it onto Izuku's arm. Again poor sweet Izuku tensed, waiting for the pain. But again there was nothing. Just the smell as the flesh burned and closed. All right, now that you've fixed the problem and got what you wanted, Doctor said to the two adults, be on your way and leave me be to my experimenting. Your torturing hurts my eyes. Aubrey and Tom leave without a word, and the doctor watches them curiously before bending over to pick up the container with a piece of Izuku in it. He says before tucking it into his pocket. End of that flashback. Izuku was still sitting on his hospital bed. He was safe. Not in that dark warehouse with psychotic people and hypocrites. But why would his brain want to show him some messed up things like that? Just for a laugh. Nobody was laughing right now. This was Izuku's body, and he could tell you that he wasn't laughing at all. He said, and Mrs. leaned forward. What did those foster parents do to me? They she chose her words carefully. Did they Izuku pauses before choking down on his fear and said pitifully, did they hurt me? With a Mrs. started shaking her head fervently. No. Of course not. When you were grabbing your head just now, was your mind showing you something from the past? She waits for Izuku to nod, and when he does she continues, no. That's not true. They just didn't feed you for a week and they locked you up in their basement. They were planning to sell you off to an underground fighting ring. Izuku's face paled and Mrs. didn't know what to do. How would he accept the lie? Oh he said, they weren't that bad then. The trauma was already setting into his bones. But what happened to your eyes? He finally asks. Finally. He had been really curious about it but never really got the chance to ask until now. The doctor was still in the room watching them with a curious expression. When Izuku turns his head towards the man and sees his clothing, he shudders again. It's not that the doctor looks like the doctor from his flashback. It was just that The doctor gave him a calculating look before leaving the room as silently as he had entered. And a 4-year-old Izuku POV, back to 15-year-old POV. That was the end of his flashback. It had ended all over. If this was a video game, his brain being a screen, it would show the end sign. It was just a quick thought in his current time flow, but in his head where everything had been relieved, the time was there. Full, complete, everything. But regarding the fact of what Mrs. had said about his foster parents if they were ever to have re-kidnapped him, he did have a response to that. Indeed. It would be dangerous, he guessed, if he were to be caught or kidnapped like that ever again. And quite traumatizing. Of course no human would have that much bad luck to be kidnapped twice by the same people. And Izuku believed that not even his bad luck was that bad. He didn't even know if he believed the flashback. It could all be a lie that his brain was making up. But back then he had asked Mrs. what had happened to her eyes. They were murky and cloudy back then, and Mrs. could still see slightly. Now they were white and Mrs. was completely blind. Her response was that she had tripped down the stairs of the orphanage and had hit her eyes on something sharp and dangerous. Lies. There was nothing she could have hit her eyes on. She was such a germophobic and was OCD about keeping the orphanage clean and tidy, there wouldn't be anything out for her to trip on or hit her eyes on. Lies, that's what it all was. She was lying to him. About everything. Everything was lying about him. It was simple. That much he could tell. Back then, even if he was 10, he still could tell that she was lying about something. It had been a month since he had been released from the hospital, and he had noticed the increased patrols around the orphanage and its neighborhood. They were worried about something. The something was probably him. Something bad had happened to him. Something really bad, something so bad that it almost led him to believe that what he'd seen and felt in the flashback at the hospital was real. But he didn't believe it until recently. In fact, he'd forgotten about it until now. He just thought his mind was trying to traumatize itself. But now that Bakugo had told him to take a swan dive off a roof, and now with Mrs. talking about those foster parents, he had started this flashback. He knew what had happened to him when he went with his foster parents, but what had happened after that one quick nap he had taken on that chair? What did Mrs. do? More importantly, what did Mrs. not do? He still didn't believe his brain 100%. Who knew, maybe it was tricking him too. Izuku wouldn't put it past his own brain to trick him like that. Maybe he should be thankful that Bakugo had said such a thing. The memories only came back because of that. After all, talking about his foster parents in the past hadn't been a trigger. It was as if his mind was saying, "Huh, you little SHT. You're telling me to kill myself. Beach what?" Grinning face with big eyes when. There are already so many people trying. Even since I was little. Huh, you won't see this bad beach kill myself. He's in fact going to not die. Just to PSS everyone that thinks that quirkless people are a waste off space off. Like Izuku had said, he wouldn't put it past his brain to trick him with fake traumatic memories like that. Like most things these days, he took everything at face value. Still, if he took everything at face value, he'd expect people to take everything he said at face value too. Which is why even if there was something this traumatic that happened in his past, he would keep smiling and being an innocent being for everyone. He still had his own problems to take care of. He didn't need others to take care of them. Izuku was cold-hearted and stone-cold on the inside. Even after his flashback, all he could think was, "Demon, that kid went through some rough Idash. Why was he like that?" He was getting off track. This topic would be revisited later, he decided. Mrs. was still roughly staring at where she thought his face since she can't see anymore before she deems that it's been long enough that they were standing there. "Go to your room and clean yourself up." Izuku nods and starts to walk past her when she sticks her chin back out, almost tripping him. "Don't scare me like that ever again, you hear me? If you're going to come home, at least call me first. Is that okay?" He wouldn't get a chance to if he kept standing here like this. He didn't even get a chance to respond before she continues talking. "And we're going to eat dinner soon." With that, she pulls back her cane and lets him walk past her and up the stairs. "I was trying to figure out how the house looked on the outside and inside. My foot has fallen asleep. It's been taking me like 5 minutes to get the BLD flowing again." Grinning face, swear him back. "My foot has refuted itself. The orphanage was, like the outside, large on the inside. Once you entered through the front door and took off your shoes, you stepped up into a large foyer. From there, there's a large hallway. This led to a bathroom, Mrs. bedroom, an office, and a living/entertainment room. Additionally, to the right of the foyer was the kitchen, and on the other side was a dining room. Mrs. had just left for the kitchen to cook, which left the stairs up to the second floor open. Izuku walked up the stairs and tried his best to watch his steps. He couldn't afford to be too loud and attract her attention. No, Mrs. He didn't want to deal with her again. He'll avoid her. "Hey, Izuku, you're finally home. I'm so happy that you came back. I needed you," a girl's voice croons just as he's about to step up onto the second floor from the stairs. Not her. No. Even if all his flashbacks were lies, she wasn't a lie. Please, not her. He just wanted to go home and get a rest. Life had other plans for Izuku. Izuku's POV, "Hey Izuku, you're finally home. I'm so happy that you came back. I needed you," a girl's voice croons as Izuku steps onto the second floor. The girl's arm sneaks around the corner of the staircase and from where he can't see her, grabs his forearm. He's wearing long sleeves, but he knows that it won't stop her. Her fingers tighten on his forearms and the scars from before split open. Even through the shirt, when the girl removes her hand, it's stained with BLD. "Oh," the girl squeals as she shows herself. "Izu, your BLD is so pretty. Your BLD is so good. Familiar. Good," she says as she liked her BLD-soaked fingers. The girl is not tall, average height with two messy, blonde buns on both sides of her head. She has yellow eyes that glowed when she got excited. Which was often. "I always liked your BLD the best," she coos as she extends her hands. "Say, would you mind if I dash?" "No." Izuku said. "For the last time, no." Whenever he came home she was always vying for his BLD. Always asking for more and more. He always told her no, but still every day she would cut his arms with her nails and lick whatever BLD that got onto her fingers. He didn't know what to do. If he covered his arms in aluminum foil, she'd go after his ankles. It was really annoying. Since his forearm was already scarred and since he'd rather his ankles not be scarred, he let her use his arm. He didn't want to ask Mrs. for help. In fact, Izuku had learned fast to wear long sleeves so that she would get less BLD. It would be mostly soaked into his sleeves instead. He was spiteful like that. He couldn't remember when Himiko had come to the orphanage. Nor did he ever learn her last name. All he knew was that she was his tormentor. When Izuku had asked why he was target out of the rest of the orphanage kids, Himiko had said something about his BLD tasting familiar. She didn't specify. He thought that it was because she couldn't remember, but he wasn't certain. But Izuku did remember that shortly after he got released from the hospital, she had appeared in the orphanage that much he'd remembered. Himiko wasn't all that bad. In fact, if she didn't like his BLD that much and annoy him like that every day, he would be friends with her. She didn't discriminate him just because he was quirkless. No, she only picked on him because she liked his BLD. He didn't know if she was better though. Because of her he had scars all along his arms and he had to hide them. At least that covered and masked some of his own scars. I mean what? You heard nothing. UW with a groan Himiko releases his arm and smiles at Izuku. Wait. You're so uptight, I just want some of your BLD. That's not normal, Izuku says tiredly. He has no time to keep up his innocent small bean act anymore. He was just tired. With a pout Himiko slowly grabs his arm again gently and pulls him up the last stair step. Fine. She declares before smiling at Izuku and saying something normal, make sure you get ready for dinner quick, I don't want to set up the table all by myself. Izuku acknowledges this with a nod and moves up the next flight of stairs. If Himiko wasn't a psycho who liked his BLD too much, he would have considered her his sister long ago. After all, neither of them ever got adopted after that event, so he had lived with Himiko the longest out of any of the other orphan kids. Izuku continues walking up the steps of the third-story stairs. The second level was for the girls. There were 4 rooms each able to fit about 5 kids in each. However, there were only a couple of girls. Actually, Izuku couldn't remember anymore. He couldn't bring himself to care about the other kids in the house. There are no other kids in the house. They all got fostered out, which is why Izuku, Himiko, and Mrs. eat dinner together. Nobody else is there. Just wanted to point that out. The 3rd floor was for boys and the 4th was the attic meant for storing things. Like the 2nd floor, there were 4 rooms each also holding up to 5 kids. However, Izuku being here for so long, he got his own room. It was the one deepest into the hallway and faced the backyard. He opens his door and enters his room and almost throws up. There's so much All Might merch in here. After his long day, he'd almost forgotten that All Might had talked to him. But now that he saw his previous idol again in his room, he remembered his conversation with the man from earlier. It made Izuku tired to think about it, and he ends up just dumping his iconic yellow backpack on the floor before settling onto his bed. With that sigh, he moves to get himself ready, changing his shirt, and breathes. He knew that he had about 30 minutes where Mrs. was cooking all to himself. Izuku looks around his room and decides to clean it up. There are trash bags in his closet and he grabs one before stuffing all his All Might into there. He's careful to roll up all his posters. There are cups, blankets, posters, stuffies, notebooks, pens, shirts, some of them rare and some of them not. The bag is stuffed by the time he's done stripping his room down to its ordinariness. What to do with the things? How could he get by Mrs. without her noticing all his stuff and then her questioning him about it? His window was an option, but he didn't want his cups to break. After all, he wanted to sell those All Might merch. Izuku freezes his contemplation as there's a sudden smell of burning from somewhere. He rushes to his bedroom window that faces the backyard, that's what I meant earlier, and looks down. There's blue flame covering and eating away at the 1st floor. Someone's quirk? No flame grew that fast and looked like that. Who was doing this dash? Yes. Mrs. She was down there on the 1st floor in the kitchen, cooking their dinner. Katsudan probably. Was she all right? Izuku's vision starts shaking and his breath comes in short gasps. His stomach starts to cramp and he folds in on himself. Now is not the time to be getting a panic attack, he tells himself. Like usual, that doesn't work. Precious moments of panic slips by before he's able to calm himself down. It's just a fire. Izuku tries to tell himself. That you're very afraid of. The backyard is slowly catching on fire. If he were to escape, now would be the time. Izuku's POV, there were only moments until the backyard would be completely on fire. By now, the blue fire had turned to a normal one and the fire department had pulled up. Izuku thought quickly. He would need this and this and this. With that, Izuku slid his window open and tossed out the trash bag filled with All Might merch out of the window. It was yeeted spectacularly out of the window and sailed until it landed a short distance from where the fire was steadily eating up the grass. Izuku slowly climbed out of the window with his backpack on his back. He positions himself to be able to jump the furthest and farthest. Now that he was actually going to make his escape, it looked like a pretty tall fall. None the matter, he had fallen from taller places and survived. But Izuku thought, thank you for all you trained me for this. With a steadied breath, he aims for the bag filled with the merch and jumps. He would be a hero. And heroes took risks. Izuku was very smart. He had taken out all the fragile, potentially sharp merch and instead replaced them with blankets from his room. On top of that, he had managed to haul his small futon, which is a Japanese type of bed. The one that's a mattress on the floor. And yeeted that out of his window. With moments to spare, he just shoved all his extra clothes into another bag and yeeted that out. His aim had been spectacular today. Unlike earlier in the day, he was now extremely lucky. They all managed to land and clump together, stacking up and reinforcing one another. That was what he was aiming for. Izuku launched himself off his window ledge and onto the pile of mattresses. There's a sense of freedom and flight as he soars through the air. But that's quickly followed by a plummeting sensation and gravity decides to keep Izuku and he starts falling. His gamble paid off. With a dull thump, Izuku hits the cushioned ground and bounces off before hitting the actual ground with a less bone-shattering force. He was fine, just bruised a little bit. The ground around him starts to smoke up and the smoke already in the air makes everything hard to see anything. With a grunt, Izuku rolls up his futon and attaches that to his backpack like a camping backpack. He leaves the bag of extra clothes and All Might merch behind. Fashion. Never heard of her. He thinks as he starts walking towards the backyard wall. It leads to the next house over. But that was burning too. It wasn't like he wanted to walk on the ground like a normal person anyways. With a small grunt, he climbs up the stone back wall. He stays there for a moment before looking back at what was once his house. Mrs. Himiko, the whole thing was up in flames and Izuku didn't know if anyone had gotten out alive. He had no way to tell. He was just sad, not for losing a home, but for Mrs. who was such a strong woman to deal with a psycho and a quirkless kid, who had built that place and sustained it by her own hands. Went through an emotional roller coaster every day. All her hard work would be broken down. But Izuku didn't even know if she was alive, so he didn't know what to think. If she died, then he would actually be a little glad that the orphanage burned down along with her. He didn't want another owner to come along and tarnish her memory. But if she was alive, then she would just have to rebuild. His All Might merch was slowly smoldering and melting away. It was sadistically satisfying to see that go up in flames. Although he would have sold it. It would have been the most useful scenario for the merch, but alas, that wasn't the case. He was glad that at least his weird fanboy addiction had been beneficial to his survival. The same couldn't be said for the hero he had idolized though. Obviously, that was not beneficial to Izuku's survival. XD, the heroes and firefighters were here. They too were focused on the fire and didn't see Izuku. With a heavy sigh, Izuku turns and prepares for his journey ahead. Jumping from the back fence onto the tree that was conveniently positioned in front of the wall, and then from there to the roof of the house. Izuku was running. He was good at running. The man who had started the sudden fire. The suspect. No, the perpetrator was standing on the side watching. He had started the fire with a giant blast of blue flame from his palm. But he made it look like he was swatting at a fly. It was a good trick he had learned from Gamer Boy. A code name he'd been taught to make part of his flame look clear. Or almost clear. The man had burnt scars everywhere and it looked like he was stapled together. With his blue hair and dark eyes, he watches as the fire slowly eats away at the orphanage where the target had lived. Ahaha. He cackles mentally as help arrives. Heroes and firefighters spill out of cars and onto the street. The water-based heroes all shoot water at the house trying to quell the flames while the others evacuated nearby houses. Ah! He continues cackling mentally. By his calculations and instincts, the fire would kill Izuku but not burn his body to ashes. Just like the doctor wanted. After all, the man had called for help. Izuku would be fine. In one way or another they would still be able to use him. Even if, by some miracle Izuku survived the fire, he would be immobilized at a hospital and that would still be an easy scenario for them to snatch Izuku. The man didn't consider the scenario where Izuku escaped the fire. After all, he was a quirkless boy. They were useless, right? Izuku's POV: Izuku had escaped by jumping on top of rooftops. But before he left completely, he stayed a little watching. Waiting to see if Mrs. was alive or not. He stuck to the shadows on roofs of neighboring houses as he watched paramedics enter the burnt-down building that was once an orphanage. The heroes had finally been able to put the fire out. However, they arrived too late. Himiko was missing. Presum dead. Burnt to the point where there were no parts of her left. But Mrs. was dead. They had moved her still body away from the house, and later the report came into the heroes in the area over radio that she had died. Izuku was the only one from the three that still lived. That he knew of. Maybe Himiko had survived. He was free. Even if that did come at a cost. He was officially dead in the books. Izuku had realized that if he'd cut off a piece of his arm and chuck it into the place where the fire burned the strongest, the front area of the house, he would be dead. Don't worry. It didn't hurt and it was taped up so nobody could track him through his bleeding. Sometimes Izuku scared himself, just how smart he was. Izuku left behind the orphanage and his past life. By the time he'd completely left his area of Tokyo and started to look around, he realized that he didn't know what came next. What was the next step in his oh-so-brilliant escape from the fire and the Sushi villain plan? Currently he was standing in front of a large metro subway. No, the trains, underground trains, not the bread/sandwich place, looking extremely out of place. He was in his slightly singed clothing and looked really lost. Plus his arm was bandaged all the way up. To sum it up, he looked like a problem and trouble. Earlier in the day, he'd left his normal shoes at the front entrance of the orphanage. But those burned down. By some sheer luck, plot armor face with rolling eyes, he had taken his shoes home with him to clean. Now Izuku had shoes. One less thing for him to buy. Izuku stutters, standing in front of the information desk at the metro station. I'm looking for a place to live. Do you know where I can find cheap rent? The lady who sat behind the table and was typing furiously on her computer doesn't even look up as she says, "Go to XXX place. Be careful though, it's not too safe around there." Izuku promised himself that he'd make it safe. After training, of course. Then he stammers, "Thank you." "You're welcome," the lady says as she continues looking at her screen. She was typing a fanfic story for Wattpad. Izuku was surprised. He'd read many fanfics before about All Might. Yes, he had that fanboy addiction to his idol. As Izuku is turning to leave, the woman slides a can of soda towards Izuku through the small gap under the plastic divider. Take it," she says. "You look like you need it." Thanks," Izuku says brightly as he takes the soda and starts walking towards the XXX place that the lady had mentioned. His childish, cinnamon bun act really worked. Though Izuku did feel bad to trick such a kind and nice lady. By the time he arrives at the location, he'd long finished the juice. Even if it was a short walk away from the metro station, he'd taken a while getting there due to traffic. He's going to keep the can though. He's going to commemorate this token of kindness. Remind himself what he's working for. What type of world he wants to help. Why he wants to help. He wants to repay all those who treated him well. Although, Izuku wasn't certain that he deserved such kindness. Did he really? When all the people who were kind to him got hurt instead. The nurse 11 years ago died in the same villain attack as his mother and the doctor. Although the doctor was not the kindest in the least, Mrs. was dead from another villain attack. It would be funny if this information's lady died in the footage. He didn't want to jinx it though. But if people who were nice to him, they started dying like that, should he instead emit an aura that says, "Don't be nice to me if you are nice to me. You'll die like that"? He was going to be a hero. He didn't want anyone to be kind anymore. He would be kind in return. Izuku knew what it was to carry the weight of the world. He did it all the time. It was pretty normal by now. Izuku walks down the dark. It was getting dark, slightly dirty roads until he finds a decent and not run-down apartment complex. It would be good enough for now. Izuku had money in his backpack. All those days he had spent working as a waiter at a cafe near the orphanage really paid off. Speaking of jobs, Izuku needed to get a job. While he did have a job at the cafe, Midoriya Izuku had died in the fire. He couldn't just randomly blow his cover like that. Izuku wasn't new at this. He walks through the lobby of the apartment and talks briefly to the old man at the window. The price was decent and Izuku agrees. Just put whatever price you think is decent. Hugging face. The man's name was Makoto Kaito. Izuku would remember. The man did give him a sandwich. What was it with these nice people? They were making Izuku teary-eyed. He didn't want them to die, but he knew his luck, so he would train. Train to protect. To protect what's his. To what he owed. But yeah, he registered under a fake alias. A fake name. A fake identity. A fake quirk. A fake family. Simple, normal, nothing special. Izuku was pro at being fake and faking his fakeness after all. The name he had told the old man who owned the complex was Nejima Aoi. He would have to remember to hack the city records and create some fake files on himself. Things to do. Things to do. Things to do. He still had so many things he needed to do. Izuku's POV. Yes. Izuku did have things to do, but he didn't do them yet. He merely went to his apartment room. It was on the number 3 on the first floor. He had to have a home, no a lair ready for him, before he could do anything vigilanteous. Seemed to be a common reoccurrence of a number for Izuku. Was it his lucky number? Or unlucky? He guessed it was just the way you looked at it. Izuku didn't believe in fate or some higher being or luck. He didn't believe in anything after All Might. But a higher being. What kind of person with some severe anger issues, besides Bakugo, would want to willingly mess with his life like that and make him go through all that crazy shit? Of course that was ignoring the whole could have happened, but it also couldn't have 1 week of torture from his foster parents. Everything else that had happened to Izuku that he knew for certain happened was still some messed up things. His parents' deaths. Mrs. deaths. His quirklessness. Being bullied. Shut down by All Might. Seriously, that higher being or fate definitely needed anger issues therapy. Izuku opened the door with a click and looked at his one room. Room. There was actually 2 rooms if you counted the bathroom, but Izuku didn't because who lived in a bathroom? Placing the backpack down near the door, he locks the door and takes his shoes off before scouring the house, looking for bugs. The digital ones and the real ones. It never hurt to be on the safe side. Then he checks for places to charge his computer. There's 1 port. No 2. And there's 1 source of light from the ceiling fan. It was actually a moderately large room. Not too big, but big enough. Guys, if you have a room, imagine something like that, okay? Before unpacking his backpack and his meager belongings, Izuku dutifully cleans the floor with some towels he got from the bathroom. He had to remember to thank Makoto-san for that later. When the room is finally cleaner than when Izuku came in, although he suspected that the old man had cleaned it previously, Izuku grabs his backpack and unpacks his futon. It smelled like smoke, but if he slept in it and hung it up tomorrow in the sunlight somewhere in the room, the smell wouldn't be a problem. Fun fact, if you do that then your blanket will smell like sunlight. In his backpack is his hero notebook, the one Bakugo burnt, a computer, a charger, just going to skip what he brought. Basically notebook, pens, computer, charger, wallet, extra clothes, that's pretty much it. Oh, and headphones. Izuku had ditched his phone. He didn't want to be tracked. No thank you. He always had hooked up his computer's internet to the neighbors so he wouldn't get tracked. Now he just had to hook up to a couple doors over and there. He would be off the grid. Practically untrackable. Plus the computer wasn't licensed under Midoriya Izuku, it was licensed under someone's name. It was also someone Izuku made up. They lived in Europe. No need to worry. They had sold their computer off to someone else, that sold it to someone on eBay and it landed with Izuku. JK Izuku had the thing all along, he just made it seem like the computer was passed around. Now with his computers set up, Izuku had everything he needed: internet, Wi-Fi, account. Now that Izuku had his bed and his computer set up, he changes his clothes. He only brought 2 pairs of clothes and was regretting his decision severely. It would be tough only having 2 pairs of clothes with him, he would have to buy more as soon as he got the chance. There was no food for Izuku today, not to worry. Izuku declared mentally. He wasn't hungry anyways. Not that he was ever really hungry anymore. Izuku was laying on his bed when he realized how stupid he was. The bed, it was just for show, or if he was injured, but sleep. Sleep. Huh? Was he joking? Was he so stressed that he forgot that he couldn't sleep? And when he did, it was rare. That was why his computer was his best friend. Giving up on his sleep, Izuku headed over to his computer/desk area and started getting to work on hacking the city hall records and creating files on a person that didn't exist. 𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲. Quirk. Analyzation could work, that would be the easiest one to fake. Parents, alive. And healthy. They moved to America for retirement. Age. Why not just do the same age he was now? The best lies came from one half-truths, right? So, 15. There were more questions that Izuku slowly filled out. But there was one that he couldn't answer. The appearance. What should he look like? He had green hair. But sometimes when he was particularly tired and hallucinating, he could see that he had white hair. His freckles, they were one of the most obvious traits about him along with his eyes. Contacts and makeup would take care of those. He sighed, more things he had to take care of, huh? But what would he put down on the form? There was a faint tickling sensation on Izuku's scalp, and he scratches it absent-mindedly. He should do a shower, his body went through a lot today. The burning sensation increases and Izuku clutches his head, doubling over in pain over his computer. The burning sensation continues for another minute, and even if Izuku's surface-level nerves were fried, these were coming deep within his body. With faint staggering steps he manages to make it to the bathroom before collapsing. He needed water. His throat was so dry, Izuku manages to pull himself up and over the sink reaching for the knob, but then his fingers freeze. His hair. It's white. Izuku lets out a sharp laugh. Was he really that tired? He was hallucinating again. Izuku blinks trying to clear his vision, but his reflection stays the same. His hair was white. Completely, utterly white. Not a single green strand remained. Izuku's face slowly stretches into a confused but self-satisfied smile. Izuku Midoriya had truly died. I just realized that Izuku arrived at the apartment and got a room with his hair still being green. Confused face, pensive face, crying face, oh wait. I can just say that he was wearing a hoodie, love, and that since the guy is old. He doesn't remember if Izuku has freckles or not. Or if his eyes are green. And the lady that works at the desk at the metro never looked up. Just gave him the soda without looking. Phew. Covered some dangerous plot holes there, rolling on the floor laughing, neutral face with his eyebrow face without mouth. I just want to say that when Bakuga bullies/abuses Izuku pretends he feels the pain, even though in reality I'm pretty sure if he didn't have like an Oscar in acting, his face would be like Izuku's POV. Deranged grin sprang from his lips as his head was pounding. Izuku takes in his new image. White hair, huh? The previous Izuku had officially died. This sudden transformation. It must symbolize something, right? Perhaps it was the start of a new Izuku. His hair stops pounding as the white hair settles and Izuku frowns before straightening. Well, that was weird. But at least now he could fill out the files for 𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲. And now he doesn't have to pay for hair dye. Paying for money. Or something along those lines. With a sigh, Izuku returned to his computer and kept fiddling around. A tired time skip. Izuku was still up. It was currently 4:33 a.m. and he had not gotten any sleep all night. Not that he needed any. He'd spent the last hours finishing his fake identity files and rehacking the city hall records to put them there and then web surfing for a costume. Something that would be simple to move in, something to keep his identity a secret. The usual deal. He finally decided to go with a long black sleeved shirt, a dark green shirt over that and long black breathes with small bracers for his ankles. He was flat-footed and twisted his ankles a lot. His arms were reinforced too, just in case. He kept his old backpack and red piece shoes. He made sure to get a mask that covered his face too. He was trying to get his hands on parts to make a voice changer, but he wouldn't make his debut as a vigilante until he got his training done. Years ago. And I mean years, when Izuku was younger, like so 2 years after the incident, Izuku began martial arts. He trained every day. Every hour that he had. Which was a lot because he was an insomniac. As a result, he knew the basics. No, he had mastered pretty much most of the useful martial arts. But everything else he knew that he didn't know came with experience. His years of gymnastics led him to be flexible and nimble enough to climb anywhere and everywhere. But he still had his daily stretches and training to do. Izuku knew that there was always someone out there that was stronger than you, that trained more than you, and the only way you could beat them was to train more than them. That had been true in the Quirkless days, but nowadays, Quirkless heroes. No, Izuku the Quirkless hero had to fight dirty if he didn't want to die. While he was trying to get his hands on pieces to build a voice changer, he bought several weapons, small guns and knives and bombs off illegal websites. Of course, while he did that, he backstabbed the dealers and turned them into the police. He had gotten what he wanted out of them after all. He also bought a grappling hook, and when he finally got his hands on all the parts he needed for a voice changer, he built that too. All the while, he was burning through his waiter money to stay in the apartment and feed himself occasionally. It had been 2 months since the incident and Izuku was finally ready. "Thanks, Mom," Izuku whispers as he puts on his costume. Everything. And I mean everything that had to do with his vigilante costume was bought with his mother's money. Just before she had raced back into the hospital, she dropped her wallet behind for Izuku to watch in the car. But then she died and Izuku still had that wallet. At her funeral he still had her wallet. He didn't know what to do with it. Eventually he kept it as a reminder of her, but recently he realized that since she was the one who supported him on his dream, wouldn't it be fitting if she, even if she was dead, paid for his costume? It was better than using the money on food that Izuku barely ate anyways. This way, Izuku sort of felt like his mom was near him whenever he put his costume on. That she still supported him. As Izuku slipped out of his first-floor building and into the alley behind the apartment, he smiled. It was time to get moving. It was time to be a hero. It was time to show them what a quirkless kid could do. Time skip. Izuku had come across his first villain's moments within stepping foot outside his room. There was a masked bandit trying to rob a woman walking home. By Izuku's chart of dangerous enemies, he could tell that the bandit was pretty low on the scale. Back during the orphanage time there were occasional villain attacks, and so Izuku had some form of experience on how to deal with this sort of thing. He jumps down landing with soft feet and slowly stalk up towards the villain. The woman who was previously cowering in the alley trying to protect something, her eyes widen as Izuku approaches the villain. He throws her a simple wink barely seen through the eye holes of his mask, and her eyes widen even further. "Gods," Izuku said, mentally rolling his eyes, "her eyes are going to fall out at this rate." The villain, thinking that the woman was finally succumbing to fear, lets a maniacal cackle and says, "That's right. Give me that girl of yours and I'll let you live." Girl. Was what the woman protecting actually her child? And was this guy? Izuku's face clouds with fury and he moves forward faster. With an air of self-confidence, Izuku places his hand on the villain's shoulder. "What dash?" the villain says, turning towards Izuku. "Who the F are you?" Izuku says, and he can hear the voice changer working. "But I'm the new vigilante in the area." The villain rolls his eyes and says, "You can't be serious. Another one of those. This area has so many. It's actually getting annoying. I see them everywhere." "No dash," the woman says, and the villain turns back to her. "What? What about no?" "No, though Eraserhead caught all the vigilantes." "No, they're still around dash." "Yes, he cleaned them all out dash." Izuku almost burst out laughing. Here was a villain and a civilian arguing about whether or not Eraserhead caught all the vigilantes or not. Especially after the villain was trying to take the woman's daughter. It doesn't matter. Izuku says with a dark smile, I'm the new vigilante now. The name's Akari. Nobody asked, the villain says with an eye roll. What are you going to do? Turn me into the police. I haven't even done anything wrong. Izuku smirks, oh really? 'Cause I think that knife you're holding against that nice lady's throat is a different story. The villain feigns innocence and surprise as he says, this. I've never seen this thing before in my life. I don't know how it got here. Based on what Izuku saw, he thought that it was highly likely that the villain had some sort of speed quirk. Something that allowed him to move fast. Just a moment ago he'd been standing near Izuku, with Izuku's arm on his shoulder, and then next he was holding the woman hostage. Yes, definitely a speed quirk. Izuku's eyes narrows as he studies the villain before him. Again, this man was of averageness. Average build and average looks that are covered by a mask. The woman was still cowering over her child that was passed out on the floor. It looked pretty awkward with the woman half standing, half crouching, and a knife at her throat. Well, Izuku says, sighing. I guess that's the way you want it to go. The villain presses the knife deeper into the woman's skin in a threat, and Izuku laughs. The woman looks over at Izuku with wide and fearful eyes. Come on guys, Izuku says in a joking mood, you guys can drop the act. You both grab the kid. You're out to kill vigilantes, right? Paid to do so. And you've been successful so far. Am I right? That kid is some kid you kidnapped or something. So if you want to kill your partner, go ahead, I'm not stopping you. After it'll make my job easier. How? The villain says, lowering his knife. Izuku doubles over with laughter. Guys, seriously, from one actor to another. You guys like SCK, okay? First of all, no villain would ever argue with a civilian, especially when her daughter was being threatened moments before. Plus, why were you guys even arguing about who was taking out all the vigilantes? Maybe the man villain who wants credit. And the woman villain who wants to finish her job and go home. That was what it was, huh? That's why your eyes didn't look too surprised when I showed up. You were expecting a vigilante to show up. You got to lie with every cell in your body, you know. Change yourself at the fundamental level. Oh. The man villain says before smirking. Well, no matter. You're just an overly cocky vigilante who wants to catch us, villains. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty confident in my abilities. The man villain speeds towards Izuku, holding the knife intended to kill Izuku. But Izuku already got that much and dodged it before the man villain had thought of attacking like that. I'm sorry, Izuku says. I'm a little too confident in my abilities that I'm kind of not confident. It scares me the way my brain thinks sometimes. Izuku was just sprouting the most random things that popped into mind. What? The woman villain says, nobody has ever dodged your attacks before. I know. The man villain says, equally stumped. Both of them looked at Izuku, who was sassily checking his watch and nails. People, couldn't you try harder to kill me? The way you moved earlier told me everything I needed. I couldn't really see anything, but you have a speed quirk. Specifically a muscle enhancement. It makes your leg work faster, but it's harder for you to change direction. And before you even attack, your forehead bulges slightly. Signs, my friends. Signs. With that, Izuku goes on the offensive and the man villain is slowly forced backwards. Izuku can see every one of the man villain's attacks before they happen due to the forehead bulge, and he slowly wears the other out with his punches and kicks to vital points. Marita! The man villain screams to the woman. Do something. Make yourself useful. I'm sorry. Marita says with a sigh, leaning on the wall. That's kinda above my pay grade. And technically I haven't done anything illegal yet. So. Izuku cackles as he continues his onslaught of punches. I like that lady. With this personality I have right now, we would have been friends. Shame she had to be a villain. Within the next minutes, Izuku had both villains tied together and to the light pole. He dials the police department and settles the young girl down next to the building's wall. He books it out of there as he can hear the sirens coming. Still, Izuku knows that the roads aren't that much safer right now, and he stays around to make sure that the girl is well taken care of and not kidnapped until the police gets to her. There was also a note taped onto the man-villain's forehead. Not a note. A light and the words, Akari, written with a glow-in-the-dark ink. For you. A voice comes from behind where Izuku was perching on a roof, watching as the police locked up the criminals and the ambulances take the girl away to a hospital. Izuku's POV, who are you? A voice comes from behind where Izuku was perching on a roof, watching as the police locked up the criminals and the ambulances take the girl away to a hospital. A couple moments before, Izuku was just sitting on the edge of the rooftop, watching the police arrive at the scene of the crime. The ambulance was there too. In a screech of whirling sirens and lights, the two groups worked fast to confiscate the criminals and secure the girl. Most of the neighborhood was awake and curious, but they kept their noses in their own business. Must be nice. Just as fast as they arrived, the road quickly cleared out and the street was silent again. Izuku was glad that he'd gotten there in time. He had the gut feeling that the girl would have been killed if he hadn't shown up tonight. Probably the villains had a kid-per-day policy or something. Maybe they would use her again as a bait later, but Izuku didn't want her to go through that kind of trauma. He was also insanely glad that he'd learned to protect himself. He had learned to mainly protect himself against being bullied, but realized that it was sort of pointless. Even if he did know how to fight back against Bakugo, Bakugo was backed up by Goon 1 and Goon 2 who would hold Izuku down if he got unruly. So it'd be worse to fight back. Plus, Izuku would probably be beat up more for trying to fight back. Something the lines that Bakugo would always be superior. Still, having that comforting feeling that he could beat Bakugo up whenever he wanted was satisfying for Izuku. Plus, the orphanage suffered a lot of villain attacks or random hate crimes on a daily/weekly basis. Probably because Mrs. was housing Himiko and Izuku, the psycho and the quirkless kid of the neighborhood. That was another one of the reasons that Izuku kept training secretly. He would protect his home. Not that that had worked out or anything. It still burned down in the end, by a villain attack no less. But before that had happened, the other random villains that came by, or neighbors, Izuku had dealt with them. Or Himiko. They had an agreement on protecting their home. The one thing they didn't fight on. I just wanted to write why Izuku knew how to fight. BC in the previous chapter, it doesn't really specify. Sorry if the timeline is getting pretty confusing. This is a couple of minutes before the Who Are You? Part back to now, Who are you? A voice asks from behind Izuku, and without thinking, Izuku almost knocks the guy out. His instincts were to fight and ask questions later, but Izuku couldn't do that. He was a hero after all. He turns around to see a sleep-deprived man with an all-black outfit. The guy has long black hair, tired, dry-looking eyes that were glowing red slightly, and a floating roll of toilet paper around his neck. Izuku stifles his urge to laugh. That would seem crazy to the man in this moment. It was Eraserhead. Quirk, Erasure. His eyes would glow red and hair would float. Whatever in his eyesight wouldn't be able to use their quirk as long as it was a quirk that wasn't a mutation. An underground hero. Someone Izuku had expect to see, especially based on the hour. Eraserhead-san. Izuku says respectfully, swinging his feet on the edge of the roof. I thought you quit your nightly patrols after you became a teacher at UA. How do you know that? Aizawa demanded. Who are you to know that? Nezu's kid. No, you're too big to be a kid of Nezu's. He was repeating himself and Izuku was fine with that. The Nezu comment was funny though. With a mysterious smile he says, I know everything. I don't want to ask the same things one more time. That takes too much energy and I'm tired and sleepy, so tell me what I want to know. Aizawa-sensei, I thought you had more patience. How are you a teacher? Oh wait, I guess you're not since you did expel your class last year. The pro-hero stiffens and glares at Izuku, the latter merely giving an innocent shrug. How do you know that? I already said that I make it my job to know everything. That's how I know that your quirk isn't working. Izuku says. The pro-hero stands still in silence for a moment before asking, well? Izuku stands up and brushes the dirt off his breathes. I just want to say that he has a hoodie and that's what's covering his brilliantly white hair. I forged to write that earlier, Skull. I got to go and do my own stuff. Izuku says, "Oh, I heard that you're the one who's capturing all the vigilantes in this area." The hobo-looking man nods and Izuku smiles a cold smile. "Well, you're not catching this one." With that moody speech that Izuku enjoyed, he does a flip off the roof of the building. There's a gleeful smile on his face as he falls. Gods, he really liked this feeling of falling. Aizawa freaked out. He thought that Akari was some sort of villain that was committing suicide to avoid jail time or something. Who knew what villains were thinking in general? But as he raced to the edge expecting to see a dead Akari splattered on the concrete floor, he doesn't see anything. Just the vigilante running away with a grappling hook slowly retracting into the vigilante's suit. Izuku was having fun. This was the most emotions he'd felt in a long time. Well, that was a lie since earlier in the day his house had burned down. There were some emotions there. But these emotions were one of exhilaration. Aizawa had to catch that vigilante. It was his responsibility as a hero to catch that vigilante. With a tired sigh, he races off the roof and starts Spider-Man swinging after the hooded figure. He really needed more coffee for this sort of job. Izuku was running, his sides were burning and he was struggling to breathe properly. He loved it. The scenery was flying by in a blur. The houses, apartments, and buildings were all old-looking, but as Izuku ran by them, he felt satisfied that he'd managed to help them slightly. Continuing to sprint, he manages to dodge Aizawa's capture scarf, and within moments of the chase, he manages to lose the older hero. Aizawa knew he lost the vigilante when he lost sight of the vigilante. It was simple. What you can't see, you can't catch. With another heavy sigh, the tired man heads back to the police department. The city was quiet and the rooftops empty as of the norm, and Aizawa was able to get back at police department quickly. This place where Izuku is covering is large, still part of Tokyo though, so pretty tall apartments and such. I just thought you needed to know that. With a swoosh, the automatic doors opened and Aizawa entered. He was immediately greeted by a cat officer who was shoved a coffee into the tired man's hands. "What are you doing out so late, Naya?" Officer Sansa asks the other man. Aizawa raises his eyebrows, an important technique he had learned when he was teaching. "What are you doing here so late?" "Fair point, Naya," Sansa said as he led Aizawa to Tsukachi's office. This police department had a close connection with heroes, and so it wasn't uncommon to see heroes wandering the halls of the department. The recent outbreak of vigilantes around Tokyo had led Aizawa being called in to capture these people. Well, not outbreak anymore, since Aizawa had caught all the vigilantes. No, he caught most. All until tonight when a new one showed up. "Akari. F.U. Akari," Aizawa thought. "Just when I thought that I was done with all this, just when I thought that I could get a night of rest. You go and show up. I want to retire. F.U. Akari." The door to Tsukachi's office clicks open, drawing Aizawa out of his thoughts. The tall man with short dark hair looked tired too. But not as tired as Aizawa though. Aizawa was proud to say he was the winner of that contest. "You caught another one," Tsukachi says, but after he sees Aizawa's mad look and coffee untouched in his hands, the detective knew immediately. Yes, there was a new vigilante. And no, Aizawa, the pro of the pros, couldn't catch him. Hence the mad look. The new vigilante must be good. Good enough that Aizawa had forgotten to drink his coffee. This was going to be a problem. Meanwhile, Izuku was wandering around town. He had been heading home when he'd come across a small group of villains trying to break into a convenience store. That had been easy to deal with. A quick call to the police department and his signature lights stick and glow in the dark writing with his vigilante name on it, and those villains were taken care of. It had been a long day. Izuku decided as he headed home, he would get a rest. Izuku was dead. Kari was alive. Izuku's POV: when he'd arrived home that night, he realized that there were two problems. He had locked the window somehow and couldn't get back into his house through the window. He didn't have his keys on him, which led Izuku having to lockpick his own door with his knives. These aren't even what they're for. After the door swung open and Izuku had quickly entered, before locking his door behind him. Really, he hoped that the neighbors hadn't seen him. The poor green sorry white-haired boy collapsed on his futon with a defeated sigh. Tired? Yeah, Izuku was tired, but he couldn't sleep. It really sucked to be like this. Time skipped to the next morning because I'm too lazy and tired to write out what happened. Plus it'd be boring. Why am I over-explaining myself like this? 3 that morning, Izuku was still up. He'd spent the whole night staring at the ceiling of his apartment. It had been 2 months since he'd first arrived at this apartment. And last night had been his debut as a vigilante. He probably didn't have too much fame on the internet yet. Except when Izuku had opened his computer, he'd been bombarded with news about a new vigilante. Akari. He guessed that news traveled fast. Or he was the only vigilante left. Either way, the news about a new vigilante Akari was everywhere online. Time skip Izuku was stepping outside his apartment for the first time in, well, a couple hours. But in his neighbor's eyes it had been days since they'd seen the young white-haired fellow. Izuku had spent the last couple hours mentally preparing himself to step outside his house. And he was reading what the internet was saying about him. However, he did need a job, money was running tight. So yes, Izuku really did need to get out of his house and get a job. He walked through his neighborhood, eyeing all the old, weathered-down buildings and the lack of vegetation all around. Some apartments had plants, but besides that there wasn't any. From what the metro lady had said, Izuku had expected his area to be slightly shadier, but it was surprisingly clean. It was a short walk to the metro and he went immediately to the information desk. Again, the lady was sitting behind the desk, typing furiously away at her fanfic she was writing. Izuku would have to remember to check it out later. With this much typing the lady was doing, it would surely be updated a lot right. And Izuku needed something to do during his long nights, besides patrolling. This time Izuku makes sure to check the woman's ID badge. Kiguki. Yeah. Hey Dash, Izuku says nervously. He was back in his acting small innocent bean form, The lady, recognizing his voice and this time actually takes the time to look at his face. It was the first time she'd seen him. Like actually looked at him, and she did a double take. Izuku was younger than she expected. Yes, she said politely while looking around for something. Do you know where I can find a job? Dash. Here, she says as she finds what she was looking for. A can of soda she'd bought earlier. Yuki shoves that towards Izuku. He takes it with a hint of surprise and Yuki taps her chin thoughtfully. Yeah, actually I do know where you can find a job. Izuku's eyes brighten and he excitedly asks, where? There's a cafe, not that far from here. It's near the police station of your district actually. They have a spot open there. You should probably check that place out. Izuku smiles and thanks Yuki repeatedly. She waves off his gratitude and tells him to drink his soda and stay healthy and safe. Oh Dash, Yuki says just as Izuku is turning away, before you go. I'm pretty sure you already know my name since it's on my badge, but what's yours? I have a feeling I'll be seeing you a lot. Might as well have a name to call you in my head, huh? Izuku nods in understanding and tells her, it's Nijaima Aoi. But I'm fine with you calling me Aoi. Can I call you Yuki? He would call her that either way in his head, but to be polite he should ask right. Yuki had nodded in assessment and then she turned back to writing her fanfic. Really, she was too nice, Izuku decided as he walked towards the cafe she'd described. Yuki was right, there was a cafe near the police station. In fact, it was right next to the police station. It made the calculative boy nervous to be so near the police, but he needed the job. So, the cafe was a small one-story building. The outside had large windows that were cleaned daily by the looks of it, and the rest was bricks. On top of the front door was a handwritten sign that just read cafe. Very original. The smell of coffee and food drifted through the air. It gave very homey vibes and safe vibes. There was a cute sign in front of the door displaying the special menu of the day. With a sigh, Izuku makes his move and opens the door. The door swings open easily with a jingle of a bell and the sound inside the cafe stops for a moment as everyone assesses the newcomer. Then they dismiss Izuku as another normal human and go back to what they were all doing before. Hello there. A cheerful voice comes from behind Izuku and he almost knocks out this person. What was it with these people? Always creeping up on him from behind. He whirls around and looks at the girl behind him. She's short and has a brown bob cut, large brown eyes, and round pink cheeks. Who are you? He demands. What was she? Some sort of villain. Why were people attacking him like this? The girl looks at him in confusion before she bursts out laughing. Oh, you're funny. I'm Achiko Uraraka. I'm a waiter here. Izuku almost slaps himself mentally. Why was he so stupid sometimes? Sorry, he mutters. The girl smiles at him before asking, no problem. I shouldn't have scared you like that. Anyways, what would you like to order? Actually, I'm not actually here for anything. Then what are you here for? Uraraka asks with a confused look on her face. I was actually looking for a job and here was recommended. Uraraka beams again and he wonders if her face hurts from smiling that much. Even for him in his happy form, that was a little too much smiling. But some people were just naturally like that. Perfect. We're just one waiter short. Can you come with me? I need you to talk to the manager before we hire you. You can start today, right? Izuku nods and then breaks into a nervous smile. He better get on her happy side. Time to pull out his cinnamon roll side. I'm sorry about earlier. I was just really worried about some things he says vaguely. Uraraka nods in understanding. No, I totally get it. And plus that was kind of funny. She was leading him through the maze of tables until they reached the cashier, who gives Izuku a funny look as Izuku walks past him. What was that about? Uraraka leads Izuku into the back room for employees before taking her leave. Here, Minami, she says as the manager turns around. I found someone who wanted to work here. The manager was a young lady that reminded Izuku of his mother. She too had green hair, but hers were lighter, her eyes black, and she was a lot taller than his mom. Plus, she was too young to be his mom and her said Hinto Minami. But Izuku knew that these things could be faked and changed. Hi, Minami said brightly. Are you ready to start working? Yes, Izuku says cautiously. Okay, the manager says with an easygoing voice. Here. With that, Minami throws Izuku a uniform and he stares at her dumbfounded. There was supposed to be more questions, an interview. What was going on? Go on, Minami says kindly, put it on and get to work. And so Izuku was hired just like that. When he'd asked about Minami to Uraraka later, Uraraka had merely shrugged and said that Minami was always like that. Easygoing, laid back. Izuku started his morning shift and he realized that his job was pretty chill. His experience as a waiter led to him being respected and admired by all the employees, who were only the manager, cashier, and Uraraka. The cashier only begrudgingly accepted Izuku. Who was that guy? And what was his problem? His name was, Izuku learned later during a small break for lunch, Haruki Shinda. Someone unimportant, Izuku guessed. Yes, that guy is not important. It though, but for now he's not important. Izuku thought his day was going well as he started his afternoon shift. Uraraka was good company and he was glad that he had something to do other than stare at the ceiling of his room. He thought that his day was going well until he showed up. Izuku's POV Aizawa was in the cafe, sitting there in that corner near the window. He radiated important person vibes and, I'm a hobo, vibes. Customers were trying their best to sit very far away from him. Izuku didn't want to serve Aizawa, but Uraraka was too busy dealing with another customer. So with a sigh, Izuku approached the pro hero who was trying to arrest him just yesterday. Hello, Izuku says brightly, and Aizawa turns his tired eyes towards Izuku. What would you like to order today? Sigh, Aizawa said. Izuku almost doubles over with laughter but manages to keep his face straight, though his teeth hurt from the effort and his eye was starting to twitch. Aizawa better say something or a wheeze would soon escape from Izuku. I would like a coffee dark, black and bitter like my soul. That was it. With a small gasp of laughter, Izuku breaks into a couple of coughs. Aizawa looked at the young man with concerned eyes. Was he sick? Why was he serving people then? Sorry. Izuku apologized. Something got into a float. After he recovered, Izuku still had trouble keeping his face straight and emotionless as he says, okay. Anything else? The pro hero shook his head and Izuku practically bolted from where he was standing. That was one of the funniest things that Izuku had experienced in his life. With a sadistic smile, he heads towards the kitchen where Minami was working and told her Aizawa's order. Within minutes, Izuku had the order ready and he brought it to the pro hero. "Here you go, sir," Izuku says neatly as he places the coffee down on the table gently. Aizawa stared at the coffee and then at Izuku in shock. Izuku really wanted to laugh. But he really couldn't, although he thought that his straight face was making things funnier. Izuku had Minami make Aizawa a milky, sweet coffee with heaps of WHP cream. It was a mocha. Aizawa started, "Sir, did you not order this?" Izuku says, plastering a confused expression on his face. Aizawa started again. "You did ask for something and I quote, dark, black and bitter, like your soul." Aizawa managed to nod in his shocked state. "Well," Izuku says, clapping his hands in front of him, "then how did I mess up your order?" With that, Izuku turned on his heel and helped the next customer. Aizawa was still in shock. "What?" Within the next couple of minutes, Aizawa sat there frozen stiff with shock before he drank the coffee on accident and realized that it wasn't that bad. And then he berated himself for thinking like that. Not wanting any more surprises, Aizawa quickly gets up and pays before rushing back to the police department. Izuku notices when Aizawa left and after helping the customer he rushes to the employee room and starts breaking into fits of laughter. The cafe had closed a while later and Izuku changed quickly back to his normal clothing of a hoodie. Was wearing a hoodie and long baggyish joggers. He was glad that he made the decision to wear long sleeves that morning. He'd merely slipped over his long sleeves t-shirt, the uniform of the cafe, and then slipped an apron over that. He would have to remember to wear that every time he came to work. Or to change in the bathroom. Right now, the girls would change first and then the guys changed. But Izuku really didn't trust Haruki Shinda to not tell anyone. At this point everyone was done changing and was sitting around in the employee-only room, chatting amiably. A short while later, Uraraka remembered something. Minami?" Uraraka asks. "Yes, Achiko-san." Minami says in her cheerful way. "You forgot to tell Izuku to sign the papers." Uraraka says flatly. Minami lets out a surprised huh. And Izuku, who was kind of used to their scattered brain nests, said calmly, "Let me sign those papers." He was referring to employment contract. Minami, who was still puzzled over what papers Uraraka was talking about, didn't do anything, and Uraraka finally had to grab the papers before shoving it in Izuku's face. Izuku was able to sign out the form easily. He had gone over the information earlier in the morning. Preparations for his job. "We get paid at the end of the week," Uraraka tells him as she files away the papers in the cabinet. Haruki Shinda had long left and it was only Minami, Izuku, and Uraraka left. It was getting late and Izuku told the other two he had to go. He had to get out on patrols soon. They bid farewells, but moments before Izuku stepped out of the door of the cafe, Uraraka called out, We are supposed to take home whatever food is left that Minami made." With that she raced over to Izuku and shoved a small plastic bag filled with pastries into Izuku's arm and then raced away, face burning. Time skipped to later that night. Izuku was out later that night as Akari. It had taken him a while to get ready. Earlier that day, to complete his disguise as Nejima Aoi, he had to cover his freckles with makeup and change his eye color from green to black. But when he'd arrived home he had trouble getting off his makeup and was only able to take out his contacts. It didn't matter since last night after his first patrol, Izuku had modified his mask a little bit. Now his eyes were covered with a small plastic bits that had little bits of upgrades in them. He was currently sitting on top of a light post outside his apartment. He didn't really know what happened next. How patrols worked. It was actually kind of weird since yesterday his run in the villains had been pure luck. But today he decided to circle around his neighborhood for a little. But that would be his plan for now. Time skip until later that night when Izuku spots a villain. Wow. Izuku thinks to himself, I finally found a villain. After like 2 hours walking around. There has to be better ways to calculate where villains are most likely to pop up. Definitely an algorithm I can make. Something I'll have to remember to do later. Oh, this villain was again in an alley, but this time he was hassling a man about giving him money. The civilian man looked like he had just left a bar after a long days of work. The poor guy looked dead on his feet and was swaying in fear and confusion as the villain kept on bothering him. I feel you there. Mr. Villain seemed to be asking for money. Obviously Mr. Civilian refused and Mr. Villain started to get violent. He had grabbed both of Mr. Civilian's arms and the guy dropped his work briefcase. There was no money in them, just some odd bits of papers. Mr. Villain was shaking Mr. Civilian by now asking for money and Mr. Civilian kept shaking his head that no, he did not have money. Finally said, Mr. Villain throws Mr. Civilian against the wall where the civilian slides down and lands in a sitting position. He's out unconscious. The villain forgets completely about the man he was harassing for money and starts digging around the briefcase. Izuku can see as Mr. Villain's eyes widen and he wonders what evil the villain had found. If only his eyes were better and he could see that far. If only. No, but really, Izuku did have something to help him with that. The plastic eye cover thing had several functions installed in them. One of them was an image enlarger. Basically his own telescope. Izuku focused on the image and read the files the villain was reading. This civilian was a researcher at a top research facility on Quirk uses. WTF. Why was this so coincidental and ironic in a dark way? And what was a man of that importance walking around in a neighborhood like this? Turns out Mr. Civilian was not as smart as he seemed, or he didn't make enough money. Or he liked it here, which would make sense. This district was nice despite its ruined reputation. With a sigh, Izuku hopped down from his lamppost and stalked towards the villain who was still engrossed in the files. As he got closer, he could hear the villain muttering himself, yes. I can sell this for money. I'm sure someone would like to get their hands on research like this dash. I'm afraid I can't let you do that. Izuku says in a cold manner as he twirled his knives around his gloved fingers. Practice. And who the F are you? The villain asked. Politely. Akari. Izuku said, rolling his eyes. Oh dash, the villain said before he started attacking Izuku, ain't no way a piece of like you can take me out. I'm going to be the one who makes a profit out of this situation. Izuku rolled his eyes again. Oh come on, did you think that if you were that strong as a villain, you would have to resort to methods such as jumping some random person as he was returning home, who just turned out to be some big researcher? The villain who was currently sending small pieces of metal at Izuku froze. The villain's quirk was a weak one. He had the ability to manipulate small pieces of metal. Izuku quickly rushed in knives out and the villain's eyes narrowed. He tried to reach out with his quirk and manipulate the metal in Izuku's knife to attack Izuku instead. Except they were already flying at the villain, released from Izuku's palm with deadly accuracy moments before the villain was trying to attack with his quirk. At best, Mr. Villain stopped the knives in their track. No, this villain had a limit. He could only manipulate a small amount of metal and he was getting close to his limit. With that in mind, Mr. Villain started charging at Izuku. Izuku breathed in and out before he too closed the distance. Sprinting faster, he uses his legs pushing off the ground and jumping off the narrow walls of the alley and managing to land behind the villain. He's able to land a couple of surprise punches before the villain turns around and blocks the rest. Izuku bends down and uses his height to sweep at Mr. Villain's legs, but the man catches it. He lifts the leg as high as it can go, trying to break Izuku's leg or something. Izuku just let him. He couldn't really tell if his joints were breaking, but within that moment he's able to throw a strong punch at Mr. Villain in the chest. The latter staggers backwards holding his stomach. There's a whirlwind of attacks from Izuku as he slowly pushes the villain out into the streets. All this time, he'd slowly been gassing this place with a sleeping gas. Izuku's mask is like a gas mask too. Within the following minutes, Mr. Villain can barely lift his hands to block and Izuku manages to tie him to the light post where he was crouching on previously. The researcher chose that time to wake up and open his eyes. He screamed as he saw a smallish dark silhouette standing in front of him with a tied-up man to a light post. Izuku looked back at him. He had a mask covering his face completely and a hoodie drawn over the rest of his head. Izuku said cheerfully, "Are you okay? How many fingers am I holding up?" The researcher looked at the gloved fingers of the vigilante and said shakily, 3. Alright, you're probably okay. Izuku said and started to walk away. Oh, don't forget to call the police, okay? The researcher nodded and Izuku started to race away. He didn't know what else to say to the poor researcher guy. After all, Akari was making a name for himself. Aizawa's POV. He'd been thinking a lot about the white-haired kid ever since he rushed out of the cafe. So much that he'd forgotten to go on his patrols, so when the call came in that there was a tied-up villain and a stunned researcher, Aizawa almost screamed out loud in anger. Except that would make him like his husband Hisashi Yamada. And Aizawa didn't want that. But still, he'd forgotten about the vigilante. With that, Aizawa set out to capture Akari. He really needed to get more of that coffee from that boy. It was surprisingly good. Izuku's POV time skipped to 4 months later. It had been 4 months since Izuku's debut as a vigilante. 4 months since he'd started working at the cafe. And it had been 6 months since the fire that had destroyed the orphanage and killed Midoriya Izuku. 6 months since Akari and 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐸𝐴 was rebirthed. Remember, he spent 2 months preparing at his home. Izuku had been working at the cafe every day, from the moment it opened at 7 a.m. to the moment it closed at 5 p.m. At first he'd gotten funny looks from Uraraka, who was probably wondering why he wasn't at school, but after he'd told her he was taking night classes and working to help his mother who was in America, she relaxed and accepted his excuse. Every night, instead of his night classes, he went out on patrols as Akari. Over the 4 months, the crime rate in his district had went down dramatically. Izuku had stopped human traffickers, drug dealers, kidnappers, fighting rings, robbery, and more. Of course, his actions infuriated Aizawa, who was still trying to catch the vigilante. It was actually funny since Izuku saw Aizawa twice a day. Once at the cafe where Izuku would serve Aizawa his sweet coffee, and once during the night where an infuriated Aizawa chased after an exhilarated Izuku. However, most nights, Izuku actually didn't see Aizawa because, unlike the vigilante, the pro slept during the nights. The pro thought nothing of it, just thought that the vigilante slept during the day. Izuku actually used this mentality to his advantage. After that, Aizawa wouldn't ever suspect 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴, a young cafe worker, to be the vigilante, or else when would the vigilante sleep? Never. Most nights, Izuku had come from his patrols early and he would study a little. He didn't really have anything to do, and studying made time fly by faster. Izuku would study anything: heroes, quirks, science, physics, fighting tips, math, English, languages in general. Anything he could get his hands on and would pass time, Izuku learned. Finally, after 4 months of this 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐸𝐴 and one day at the cafe, he and Uraraka were chatting when the cafe didn't have any new customers coming in. Hey! Uraraka had started after they'd fallen into companyable silence. Huh? Izuku asked tiredly. Last night had been taxing. Akari had fought numerous kidnappers and burglars. Although the crime rate was going down, there were still villains going around. What high school are you planning to go to? Uraraka asked before she frowned. Are you even going to go to a high school, or are you going to continue your night classes, guys? First of all, a couple of things. 15 is indeed an age to go to high school, and also I didn't calculate it well when I wrote it since the whole flashback arc threw me off. But anyways, some of the kids in class 1 are older too. Like Momo is 15, same as Ida, well Ines. One of Bien. Izuku starts ready to make up some random BS before he takes a moment to think about it. High school? I actually don't really know. I don't really have a plan. He says, why are you asking? Well, Uraraka starts, you know how Aizawa-san always comes to this cafe in the morning before going to the police department. It got me thinking, seeing him. It was basically the whole thing about how nice he was and that he would be teaching the first years this year at UA. Blah blah blah. And I also read your files when you applied for your job, and I was able to see your quirk. It's so cool, and I was wondering. No thinking, would you want to apply with me to UA? We could be heroes together. Izuku thought for a moment about what Uraraka had said. Aizawa as a teacher. Drama. Why not? He says out loud. Yeah, I'll apply with you. We could be hero buddies. Uraraka cheered, and Izuku mentally rolled his eyes. Really, he didn't want to have a hero buddy. Izuku was bored anyways. Over the years, during his late-night study sessions, Izuku had actually finished most of the high school and college courses online. Being an insomniac made him smart. Plus, mini flashback, the teacher glares at him. If you want to go to UA, then you better pay more attention in class. I was just saying that 2 students were applying to UA. You are applying, right? And so is Katsuki. The poor boy flushes again, this time from anger. Yeah, I've applied for UA. Ha! A certain blonde, spiky-haired boy cackles with laughter. Shitty, do you wants to get into UA? The rest of the class laughs, treating Izuku like a joke. Just in time, the end of the school bell rings. The teacher sighs and leaves the classroom. As he leaves, he manages to throw Izuku a cold smirk. Bakugo crosses the room towards where Izuku was trying to pack up as quickly as he could. As Izuku tried to put his journal number 13 into his backpack, Bakugo grabs it and blasts it out of the classroom. With his small mini explosion noises coming from his hands, he advances towards Izuku. Izuku watches, eyes wide, as his notebook, in all its burn and flaming glory, smash into the window and shatter it before continuing to fall. Oi! The other boy screams in front of his face. Izuku shivers as Bakugo puts his exploding hand near Izuku's face. Drop out. From what? Izuku asks. From you know what I mean. End of mini flashback. Izuku knew that Bakugo would be applying, and he would most likely get in due to his quirk. After all, Bakugo was always talking about how he wanted to be the first one out of their crappy school to get into UA. But it would be funny if there were 2 students, one secretly, who got into UA. It would be dramatic. And if Izuku's secret ever got out, it would awesome to see his reactions. Just as much as Izuku loved being a hero, as much as he loved saving the people and saving the people of Tokyo, he loved drama and angst even more. After all, that was practically what Izuku was, an angsty and dramatic teenager. No, going to UA wouldn't be a bad idea. Plus, Izuku would learn how to be a better hero. Aizawa was sleepily drinking his coffee in the corner of the cafe when he heard the 2 waiters talking. They were talking about UA. Huh? Please come, Aizawa thought. He sipped his coffee as he heard the white-haired boy say that yes, he too would apply with the bob-haired girl. Aizawa couldn't help but do a little pump fist mentally. Then he took a big slurp of his coffee content. Be honest with me. If that was tea, that would have been perfect. Pensive face, but Aizawa, being a coffee man, can't be helped. Izuku's POV time skip another 4 months. It had been another 4 months after Izuku had agreed to apply to UA with Uraraka. He wasn't going to lie, it had been a long 122 days. Really, he did count. But recently he sort of found it weird that he didn't even know what Uraraka's quirk. He thought that it would be polite to keep out of her personal business until she let him in. Unlike what she did with him, she really read his files. But that was all in the past now. For the past 4 months Izuku had spent them working, training, studying, patrolling, and dodging Aizawa. All the usual things. UA's entrance exam was today, and Izuku was really glad. He was starting to get a little annoyed that he had to wait so long. Plus, being a vigilante was getting easier. Really, he was gaining too much experience. If he got into UA, he would really have to rely on his acting skills to manage to pull through. Or else how would he play off his skills and experience? Seriously, all the villains that Izuku seemed to be fighting were low on his dangerous enemies list. After all, Akari was quirkless. He was just fighting with knives and guns laced with an additive poison that paralyzed the victim. Really, people were so dumb. Izuku wished for more excitement, but he didn't really want to jinx it like so many things that he'd already jinxed. No matter, excitement was a break in his normal routine. Lately he'd actually been getting pretty close to Yuki. He got all his information about his district that he was patrolling from her. All his news about what people were saying about Akari from her. Really, she was like his information's dealer. Although she didn't know that. Anyways, Izuku and Uraraka had promised to meet up in front of the large gates of the UA campus. But he got there a little early. Just like 15 minutes early. He was really bad at judging the time since, well, Izuku had a lot of time on his hands, so he kind of just went with the flow usually. In the past couple of months, Izuku had forced himself to eat a little healthier, and he had grown 2 inches since then. Really hitting his second growth spurt there. He was now 5 feet 7 inches instead of his previous 5 feet 5 inches. When Bakugo last saw him. Yeah, that was what the little bean was worried about. Bakugo recognizing him, however, with his new height, hair, eye color, and covered freckles, Izuku was pretty much covered. Yes, I know height in fact truly does that much. I've read too much fanfics in the dark, and now I can't PPL far away, so I judge them by their heights. Downcast face with sweat. Izuku also had his skinny but strong physique. There was no way Bakugo would be able to tell. Just then, after 15 minutes of waiting, Uraraka showed up right on time like a normal human. Izuku started walking and then tripped on some imaginary air particle that was in his way. He was just trying to see what her quirk was. The moment the ground started hurtling towards Izuku's face, Uraraka dashed over to him and reached her hands out. Izuku felt the moment her fingers touched his arms and he started floating. He was close enough. He'd guessed she had some sort of float-y quirk based on how she was able to move all those heavy dishes and furniture around the cafe. Thanks, he stammers as she releases her quirk. He tries his best to blush on purpose. Uraraka gives him a kind smile and tells him jokingly, "I was going to keep my quirk a secret from you. I want it to seem all cool and moody. But I don't want you to fall right before we take the entrance exams. That'll be bad luck for you." Seeing her cheerful grin, Izuku starts to return her warm vibe and his previous gloomy vigilante personality faded away. 𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐽𝐸 was back. "But really though, Izuku said with all seriousness, what is your quirk?" Uraraka explained her quirk as the two of them headed towards the auditorium of UA. They get inside the large room and immediately greeted by a "Hey" from Present Mike, who was standing on the stage. Aizawa was standing to his side, partly hidden in the shadows with a dark look on his face. It was loud. // Within the next couple moments, the auditorium filled up with applicants and Present Mike screaming. After pretty much all the seats were filled, Present Mike started his presentation about how the entrance exam would work. First came the written exam. They would sit where they were sitting in the auditorium and fill out a test with 400 questions. I made up this number and they had 4 hours to finish the test. After that, either the time was up or everyone finished on time. The second part of the entrance exam started. It was a practical test where the applicants were each put into a beta ground and had 10 minutes to defeat a group of robots. These robots all had points on them ranging from 1, and there was 1 0-pointer to throw everyone off. And it couldn't be defeated. Their results were calculated based on the number of points they got from defeating the robots. They would get their scores the following week. With that, Present Mike finished with a screech, "Why?" And the first part of the entrance exams were handed back. The writing part. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽𝐸𝐸 was really easy. There were 400 questions based on subjects taught at school: science, math, Japanese, English, social studies, along with questions about hero etiquette. Overall, for someone who spent the past couple of days, it was really easy. Izuku managed to finish the test within the 1 hour and 40 minutes 400 questions / 100 minutes 4 questions per minute, which is insane but still probably borderline feasible. Thank you at Dark Chocolation. The entire time he was just wondering what they were testing him on. That was like a warm-up worksheet for him. // As he walked down from where he was sitting, he got a lot of concerned and pitying looks. People thought he was giving up. Aizawa even gave the boy a second look. He thought that Izuku would do better. Nobody really expected what would happen next as Izuku turned in his test and started to walk out of the auditorium. Present Mike, who was frozen in shock, quickly got over it and raced towards Izuku. He was doing his best not to shout after the white-haired boy. "Are you actually done?" he managed to say quietly. Izuku nodded. "All 400 questions?" the teacher said in a daze. Izuku nodded again. "You still have 2 hours and 20 minutes to go. Are you sure you want to turn it in?" Izuku turns around to face Present Mike and with an innocent air, he says in a small voice, Yes, I finished. I'm Present Mike just stood there in shock, and with that Izuku turned on his heel and left the auditorium to wait the rest of the 2 hours and 20 minutes on a bench outside. Really, that test was too easy. His peers who were struggling on the test were shocked by what they just witnessed. A small, young-looking boy, white hair, had finished already. WTF. 2 hours and 20 minutes later, it's time for the next exam. Present Mike screeched before half of his shouting speech was cut off to a normal tone by Aizawa's irritated glare. Really, his husband was too much. "I'm going to say this again," Present Mike said cheerfully, ignoring Aizawa's frozen glare. "The next exam is called a practical exam. You're each going to be sent to a ground where you have 10 minutes to defeat a bunch of robots. These robots all worth either 1, 2, or 3 points, and depending on your final score you might or might not make it into UA. Oh, and watch out for the 0-pointer, he's a little devious. And by that I mean he's impossible to take down. The students buzzed with anticipation. What was going to happen? All the applicants were sent back outside, and on the way, they saw Izuku sitting on the bench staring into nothing. Hey! Present Mike called, and Izuku noticed them. He quickly hurried to rejoin the group. Nobody was looking at him, and there was a small bubble of antisocial around him. Izuku had heard the speech earlier, and he'd been thinking about how to defeat a 0-pointer. He had a plan, but he wasn't sure if it would work. Finally, something that was higher on his dangerous enemies list. Izuku's POV: the applicants were led deeper into the school and towards the grounds built within the campus. They were then split up into smaller groups and sent to the starting mark within the small miniature cities. UA was really rich, Izuku guessed. Which did make sense since it was one of the best hero schools in Japan. After a couple pointless minutes where people tried to talk to him, and he warded their attempts off with a confused look and innocent smiles, the practical exam started. Well, there was no countdown, just a yeah. From present Mike that spurs all the kids into action. Izuku stands still thinking over his plan as a small villain robot is coming towards him. Now he's wondering if he should take it out or just leave it. He gets no choice to decide himself as a blonde, tall kid shoots his weird sprackly light at it. From his stomach. Mon ami. The turns out French kid says, "Thank you for the distraction. I would totally say that I'd like to see you later, but if you let a villain almost get you like that, money, I might not see you again." Izuku gives him a bright smile as Aoyama continued rambling. He was talking about cheese. Izuku completely ignored him and calculating the possible places where the 0-pointer would appear. Out of all the villain robots, the 0-pointer seemed to be the most interesting one to fight. While it was true that the smaller villains would account and slowly add points to one's score, Izuku had a theory. This was a hero school, right? And heroes fought villains, so obviously the practical entrance exam would be a recreation of a real villain, right? And Izuku knew from experience that villains relied on their strong and unshakable leader more than anything. With that in mind, Izuku waved at Aoyama as the Frenchman ran to find more robots. He then started to head towards the center of the small mini-city. Villain bosses appeared in two places most often. Either where there were no heroes, or where all the heroes were located at. The former was for smaller villain groups that didn't want to fight heroes and mostly specialized in illegal dealings and smaller operations. These small villain groups had their villain boss where there were no heroes. The latter was for a larger or more ambitious villain groups that had beef with the heroes or just wanted to fight the heroes. These villain bosses were the ones who would more likely appear where all the heroes were gathered. Izuku started jogging. Picking up his pace as he passes by multiple tattered and destroyed buildings. He wondered how deep UA's pockets stretched for this. But really, Izuku had a feeling that what UA was trying to replicate was the second version of villains. Someone who wanted to take down the current system of heroes. Especially with the way the villains were attacking, it really furthered Izuku's belief in his own theory. Within moments, Izuku manages to reach the center square of the small city. There's a loud rumble and the ground beneath the applicants' feet starts to shake and tremble. Everyone who was gathered there, which was pretty much everyone, was wondering what was going on. But their questions were soon answered as the concrete ground broke apart and a large 0-pointer started rising from the ground. Every wannabe hero started screaming their heads off and being all dramatic about how UA was trying to kill them. They then started to sprint away, the blue-haired boy with square glasses leading them to safety. Or was he running away faster than everyone else? Instead of running away like everyone else, Izuku moved against the stampede of the crowd and started towards the robot. It was tall and large and metal emichim so smart, and Izuku had to find a way to get eye level with it. Really? Izuku's black eyes contacts narrowed in excitement as he sprinted towards a building. It was actually one of the only buildings left standing and was a little reckless since it was so close to the 0-pointer. As Izuku dashed into the building and started racing up the stairs, the 0-pointer continued rising out of the ground, breaking and cracking more of the ground. By the time Izuku reached the roof, Mr. Zero had reached his full height. A height of 4 stories. We believe that UA was too cheap to pay for 5 //. Not to worry, Izuku's building had 4 stories too. Having no time to think, Izuku leapt off the edge of the roof. Pushing hard with his legs, he aims towards Mr. Zero's neck. He had a feeling what he was trying to find was around there. Izuku had jumped off just in time as the Mr. Zero's palm and arms smacked the side of the building with so much force that the top half just randomly flew off into some random direction. It cracked before collapsing. Mr. Building was no more. Izuku, almost sarcasm, broke down into tears at the loss of such an important ally. It was no problem though, since Mr. Building had already served its purpose. It had given Izuku enough height that when Izuku felt himself connect with the robot's body and he grabbed, he had landed on a small nudge towards the bottom of the neck of the zero-pointer. The zero-pointer joints groaned as it swung around trying to shake Izuku off. There was a little ridge that he was holding onto and it was a good hold. After a while, the robot stops shaking him around and starts to walk with jarring steps. Izuku was bouncing against the metal of the robot and he could feel his ribs starting to bruise. With the reminder that he was in danger, he quickly felt around the metal neck of the robot looking for a small panel. Something that would hold a bomb perhaps. Nezu probably wouldn't be that nice though. After a couple of pats, his hands land on a small area and as he pressed down onto it, the panel popped open. It was about as big as his palm. There were no screws that he had to take out. No, that would mess up the camouflage of the whole thing. The opening mechanism was just a small pressure plate that you pushed down on and the door popped open. There appeared to be only empty darkness inside the panel, but after a couple of seconds when Izuku's eyes adjusted, he could see a sign. It was clearly written in the president's handwriting and the sign read, "Cut one of the wires out, do it." There were 2 wires beneath the sign, one colored red and one colored blue. And all Izuku had to do was pull one out. Minutes left in the practical test. Only 30% of the robots are undefeated. Which one would Izuku pull? Izuku's POV. As Izuku stared at the 2 wires, he couldn't help but think, Nezu, that little piece of, but then he sighed and accepted his fate that the Satan of UA had laid out before him. He truly respected the principle of UA too much to say anything bad, not really though. Plus he couldn't really say anything since he had annoyed Nezu just as much by repeatedly hacking into the UA system and trolling the teachers and Nezu. UA had increased their security around their system, but that wouldn't keep Izuku out. People with too much time on their hands were dangerous. The red wire glinted heavily and the blue wire glinted heavily. Izuku didn't know which to choose. His gut was telling him to pull the red wire, but it could always be blue. Blue symbolized good, right? Or like correct. Or was that green? It didn't matter if it was green, after all green was blue but mixed with yellow still. No matter how Izuku put it, his gut still said red. As Izuku hung onto the robot as it rampaged around terrifying all the applicants, his mind finally showed him a solution in the form of a memory. His mind flashed back to what President Mike had said earlier during his big speech in the auditorium. Flashback: each robot has a red chip that when destroyed will notify us who killed/destroyed it. And it'll add points immediately to your name, and if you take a critical hit, your blue chip will alert us that you are down and we will send help over immediately. End of flashback. Without thinking, Izuku reaches into the panel and yanks the red wire out. Oh gods, why didn't he grab the blue one? It would have been funny if the applicants all exploded. But Izuku knew that red was the right answer, and as much as he wanted to explode some of the applicants, he did have a test to pass. Thank you, Nezu. Izuku thought, something he never thought he would say, much less think. Nezu had shown Izuku the answer by coding present mixed speech into an answer for the choice before Izuku. Thanks to Nezu, Izuku was getting into UA. At least if his gamble and guess was right. The zero-pointer Izuku was clinging on froze its mad rampage and attack before it started falling back down to the earth. Where Izuku was right now, he would be squished directly by the giant robot. His brain scrambles to come up with a solution to his impending doom, and at last he finds one. Izuku starts climbing around the robot's neck trying to reach the side where he wouldn't be squished from, and at the last possible second he manages to reach his destination, stand up and jump off the robot. Mr. Zero-Pointer crashes into the ground, splintering the concrete further, and there's a loud clattering as his metal armor repeatedly slams against the UA grounds. If Izuku was still standing on the robot, he would have probably broken both his ankles from the force of the impact. That is if he hadn't launched himself off the robot at the right time. Please note that Izuku had put no calculations into this, just a healthy dose of instincts and luck that he'd been lacking in other areas. The feet hurt from the impact of the jump off the robot and the landing plus the roll, but it hurt less than being squished under that giant robot, or having both of his ankles broken from the impact. Izuku had only lightly sprained his ankles and he managed to stand up and walk it off. He had promised himself that he wouldn't get injured today. It was only so that he wouldn't have to see Recovery Girl and so that his scars won't be seen. There were 10 seconds left on the clock of the practical exam and Izuku put as much distance between him and the 0-pointer as he could. Right before the 1 second turned to a depressing 0, like Izuku's current total of points, the robot behind him exploded in a bright fiery light of sound and metal raining from the sky. Similar explosions followed and within moments, it was raining metal from the sky and the atmosphere had turned a fiery orange color. As a final score, Izuku guessed that he'd gotten around 20% of the total amount of robots in this group that participated. Behind him, pieces of metal from the 0-pointers slowly fell back down from the sky and with the bright orange sky behind him, Izuku looked really badass as he walked away from the scene. However, his awesomeness was broken by a cheerful and innocent smile, but that was only on the surface. Internally, he was cackling with joy. With a loud screech, Present Mike had announced over the speakers that the practical exam was over. Izuku had gotten what he'd come here for. The highest score just to rub around it in the blue-haired boy's face when he saw him at school. Yes, Izuku was spiteful like that. He had promised himself earlier that he would show the blue-haired boy what someone like him could do. What someone who fought quirkless or was quirkless could do. Flashback as Izuku was walking towards the ground for the practical exam, Ida had fallen back to chat with him. I saw that you finished the written exam so fast. Ida screamed and Izuku flinched. He had a bad run with screaming people, All Might, Bakug. You could see where his dislike of loud people had come from. I admire you. You're so smart and heroic. The blue-haired boy continued, completely ignoring Izuku's uncomfortable looks. What is your quirk? Izuku said quietly and Ida immediately shut up to hear what the white-haired boy had to say. I have an, analyzing quirk. An analyzing quirk. But you still want to become a hero. Why didn't you enroll in management instead? You'll be quirkless out there and we both know that fighting quirkless is a dash. Izuku had seen Uraraka and had started to pick up his pace, but to his disappointment, Ida easily tagged along. Right, the other boy had a speed quirk. Ida had continued rambling about how Izuku shouldn't apply for the hero course and how unheroic it was to joke around with pro heroes by applying like this. Izuku wanted to kill the other boy. Ida was getting on Izuku's nerve, but he suppressed his feelings and laughed along with the strict and slightly awkward boy. It probably couldn't be helped the way Ida thought. Quirk discrimination wasn't usually taught at schools. Much less to richer families like Tenya Ida's who came from a long line of pro heroes. Not to worry. Izuku would teach him later, after he got into UA. He would teach Ida that his quirk or fighting quirkless during a fight didn't really change anything about the outcome of a battle. He had caught up with Uraraka and both of them rolled their eyes as they heard the boy continue rambling. Izuku really existed only to rub it in people like Ida and All Might and Bakugu that indeed quirkless people could become heroes. End of flashback. Really right now all Izuku had the urge to do was write. Akari was here. But he couldn't do tot, that would blow his cover and that wouldn't be dramatic enough. Izuku lived for drama. Izuku walked towards the entrance of the grounds and as he neared, he passed a bunch of people getting kisses from Recovery Girl. He passed through a small crowd and it parted to let him through. Everyone had probably heard the explosions and was wondering if that was this young boy's quirk. With a tired mental roll of his eyes, Izuku started to exit the grounds. Within moments he had reached the exit of UA before he realized something. He'd forgotten to pick Uraraka up. They'd promised to walk home together. Hey Aoi. Her cheerful voice came from behind him and he sighed with relief. He had been thinking about leaving her behind since he was too tired to go back for her. Great job on the entrance exam. She chattered and they walked out of the school together and back to their neighborhood. Izuku's POV time skip. It was the Friday after the entrance exams for UA. The day Izuku was told that he would get his results back from school. A large amount of childish excitement and nervousness flashed through Izuku's body. This morning he had rushed out of his room the moment he heard the mail cars, is that what they're called? And rushed to check his mailbox. His letter had arrived, and once he returned to the room barely believing what was happening, he immediately texted Uraraka via his giant clunky computer. She had responded immediately and said that he should come over to her house to open their letters together. She lived in an apartment on the opposite side of the cafe, and it was a pretty far walk to her house from his house. It wasn't a problem. Izuku decided in bright spirits. Before he'd messaged Uraraka, he'd placed down the letter, and now he picked up the letters with his pair of clippers that you would normally see on dining table and placed the whole thing in his backpack. He slipped that whole thing over his shoulder and started walking to Uraraka's house. He made sure to walk carefully as if his backpack was made of glass. The entire walk, he was on high alert as if some sort of villain would attack him and take away his letter. By the time he reached Uraraka's house, his nerves were shot, and Izuku could say that that was the most amount of anxiety he had felt in a while, even when fighting villains. Well, maybe not, since fighting villains caused anxiety, but he could safely say that in his normal and civilian life that was the most amount of anxiety he had felt. No, wait. He couldn't even say that since he got panic attacks at the weirdest thing. Loudly crying face. Uraraka lived with her parents on the 4th floor of a large apartment complex. She hadn't really said anything, but Izuku understood her situation a little. Still, he didn't want to assume, so he didn't ask. He knocked on the door to her apartment and she opened it, smiling widely. The red spots on her cheeks were glowing with excitement. "My parents aren't home right now, she exclaims as she leads Izuku inside. "They're out working on." "Well, anyways, they aren't the subject right now. What I wanted to ask is if your parents were okay with you coming over here." Izuku says, pausing and swallowing hard. "My parents, I live alone. My parents, they're elsewhere. So yeah, they won't mind." "Oh," Uraraka said in a small, understanding voice. They walk to Uraraka's room in silence until Izuku breaks it with a small, awkward but cheerful grin and says, "I can't wait to see your acceptance letter." Uraraka noticed how Izuku hadn't said anything about himself, and knowing that he suffered from a lack of self-confidence, she hurries to reassure him, "We'll see your acceptance letter too." /N. I know that a lot of people hate on Uraraka, and while I can sort of see where you are coming from, I just want to say that I can respect anyone who can float themselves while having the hanging threat of throwing up, who can fly themselves up onto a building and scream about how Izuku should be welcomed back into UA to a group of anxious people. I respect anyone who can accept Himiko. Wait, spoilers. But yeah, those are all canon and I can respect her. So I chose not to make her liken but BC. Well, I decided that it was too much work and I sort of respect her, but sometimes I hate her -0. Please don't cancel me. Izuku shoots her a grateful smile and they settle on the cushions around the low table in the center of Uraraka's room. Uraraka's room was bare. There wasn't much in her room. No posters or decorations around the room, just a plain wall with a small carpet with a low table and cushions in the center of the room where they were currently sitting. There was a small bed and closet, and that basically completed the whole room. Really, it was a simple room, holding only the bare minimum. Izuku grabbed his clippers out of his backpack and slowly pulled out his letter, still in its envelope. Uraraka, who was watching him, laughed. Izuku looked surprised for a moment before he joined her, laughing at his own nerdiness. As soon as both letters were placed on the table, the two nerds looked at the envelope with curiosity before opening it in one quick motion. Inside was a small disc that immediately turned on, and a holograph man sprouted from the little piece of advanced technology. Uraraka immediately thought of how much money she could resell it for and then immediately shut down her immediate thought. They watched in amazement as All Might appeared on the screen in his buff form. "I am here," All Might declares, and Izuku smiles brightly. His favorite hero had made an appearance. "You have been accepted into UA." Both devices said at the same time, and Izuku and Uraraka let out a united high-pitched squeal. They were holding each other's arms as they watched the number 1 hero holograph continue talking. "Congratulations," All Might says. I will now show you your score on the tests. Izuku's scores for the written exam was pulled up onto the screen. Uraraka had managed to score at 89%, and when she saw Izuku's score she squealed again. You finished so fast I thought you flunked it. She said she was so happy that she was almost crying. Next will be your score for the practical exam. Izuku had a score of 85 and Uraraka a score of the 2 squealed again. At this point full-blown tears were leaking out of Uraraka's eyes. She had only just started feeling the full force of her relief at being accepted into UA. And now your overall score. This is by class. These names are your new classmates. A long list of names were shown, but only a couple of them stood out to Izuku. His name 𝐻𝐼𝐸 was at the top number, but the name after that was Katsuki Bakugo. He was going to be in a hero class with Bakugo. Oh, Izuku couldn't wait to have fun. Ida was 6th and Uraraka was 4th. This was awesome. He couldn't wait to see Ida's reaction on Monday, the first day of school. With that, the overall scores and rankings flashed away and was replaced by All Might, who was smiling widely. Both his and Uraraka's holographs said the same thing. It's time to start your hero academia. Welcome to UA. We're excited to have you and guide you on your path to becoming a hero. Oh, like I said before, welcome to your hero academia. Izuku thought. Excited, huh? Really, All Might was too funny sometimes. Izuku hated him so much. But with that the screen cut off and the holograph disappeared. Izuku smiled as he stared at the little device, glad that the hero was gone. Maybe he could recycle the parts later for one of Akari's little trinkets. Uraraka was wondering if she could sell it to the collector of odd trinkets man at the end of the street. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. They had been accepted into UA and both were excited for their own reasons. Izuku's pure and whole face glowed with excitement that barely concealed his sadistic intent, while Uraraka's face glowed with genuine excitement. Indeed, their hero academia would be starting from here on out. Things were going to get interesting. Things were going to get fun. Things were going to get messy. Oh, how Izuku was excited. Izuku's POV time skip. 3 days later it was Monday, 3 days after that fateful Friday when Izuku got accepted into UA. On the first day of school, he had decided to go to UA himself without tagging along with Uraraka. But now standing in front of the classroom door to enter class 1A, and he kind of felt like he should have tagged along with Uraraka. There were multiple reasons that had led Izuku to think like this. He had gotten lost. He didn't want to talk to other people if he didn't have to know it had been 10 months since he'd seen Bakugo. But the important thing Izuku was wondering was whether not Bakugo recognized him or not. It was a new class and new people and new teachers. And he was kind of late. Well, not really. He was actually perfectly on time. But it felt late. He felt like a failure. Which wasn't an unusual feeling for Izuku, but really, Uraraka would have been his backup. She was probably in class already and making friends. Izuku sighed at that thought. Fine. He would open the door. Just as he was raising his hand and trying to get over his anxiety to open the sliding door, it slammed open. Who's been standing in front of this door for so long? I saw your shadow and am wondering if you can't open the door or something. Ida announced in his loud, proper voice, but he trailed off when he saw Izuku trembling in front of the door. Izuku immediately stiffened and gave a cheeky grin with a small wave. Was kind of scared of Stuff he mumbled, looking around. The class, who was chattering loudly earlier, fell silent as they saw the tiny white-haired boy at the door. The students inside, who were a variety of sizes from the weird purple ball-haired kid to a kid with octopus arms, all stared at Izuku and he kind of shrank away from their gazes. Being innocent 𝐻𝐼𝐸 wasn't too bad. It was like being Midoriya Izuku. As the blue-haired boy with glasses let Izuku walk by, Izuku could feel the stares and whispers of his classmates. That's the kid who got the highest score on the entrance exam. He looked so small. He looked so cute. What did he do to get that high of a score? Wasn't he the kid who finished the written exam so fast? Owie! Uraraka was the one who called his name, and he looked gratefully at her. She was conversing with a couple of girls in the class, and he immediately went over to her side, seeking protection from the voices. Sorry, he mumbled as he reached her side. I should have accepted your no matter. She says cheerfully. All that matters is that you made it. Now let me introduce you to my friends. This is 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲, a frog-looking girl who gave Izuku an assessing look. This is 𝐼zawa, a pink-haired girl who spinned in a circle and bowed. This is 𝐻𝐼zawa, a black-haired girl with an impressive motherly aura. This is 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲, a girl with purple hair and a pair of wires dangling from her ear who just raised her eyebrows. And this is 𝐻𝐼zawa, a blank space was pointed at and Izuku finally noticed the pair of gloves that were floating in the air. There were other random accessories floating in the air, and he smiled at where the girls' glasses were. She gave him a thumbs up. These are all the girls in the class 1A, Uraraka says pitifully. Isn't it lame that there are only 6 of us? And there are 20 students in this class. We're the minority. We've got to show them down. Aizawa said as he entered the room without anyone noticing. The boys been staring at Izuku trying to figure him out, what his deal was, and Ida had returned to his seat earlier and was trying to urge the others to sit down before they got in trouble. So yeah, nobody noticed as the underground hero entered the room and told them to sit down. Aizawa strode to his tiny podium as all the rest of students scurried back to their desks. Izuku was walking back to his seat, number 18, when he paused frozen in his track. He was sitting behind Bakugo. The universe. It hated him. It just had to do this to him. Is there a problem, Nejima? Aizawa asks from the podium. Izuku smiles brightly as he inches to his desk. No. The class really was curious about this boy. How had he gotten the highest score in their class and still acted like that, so pure? So cinnamon roll teeth. Bakugo says as Izuku slid into his seat behind him. With a breath of relief he realized that for now, Bakugo didn't recognize him yet. So Aizawa starts his lecture. Introduce yourself to the class, please. With that, the man summoned a sleeping bag out of nowhere and curled up with his back facing the class. The class stared at him in shock, wondering what had just happened. Their teacher just fell asleep. Sure enough, there were small rises and falls from the tired man as he took a brief nap. He was up late last night looking for Akari. Ida stood up and announced that they must do what their teacher had ordered them to do. Starting from the French guy who sat in seat number 1, every student would have to go up to the podium, careful of the sleeping caterpillar, and introduce themselves to their classmate. Mon ami. Aoyama declares, I am Yuga Aoyama. My quirk in naval laser. I can shoot lasers from my navel. But my stomach hurts if I do it too much. And I love 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲. Next Aizawa says from where he was laying on the floor. The class stared at the yellow blob again. He wasn't asleep. Mina Ishido was up next. I'm Mina Ishido. My quirk is acid. I can produce acid from my body. The only problem is that I can't make too much or else my body will lose its natural resistance to acid. Someone clamped the purple ball-haired kid before he could say anything. Izuku didn't know what that tiny guy's deal was. Next I'm 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐴𝐽𝐸. My quirk is frog. I can basically do anything a frog can do. Next. Tenya Ida is here. Ida declares as he made his weird arm choppy movements. My quirk is engine, it can dash. Next Aizawa says, and the class minus Izuku stared at him. Izuku was half daydreaming. Of course his brain was noting everyone's quirks for further study, but he wasn't really paying attention. Uraraka Ochiko. Uraraka says with a cheery smile. Her bob cut waved in the wind as she bounced up to the podium and showed everyone how her quirk worked. My quirk is anti-gravity, it can dash. Next. Aizawa says, and this time the class burst into uproar. Let them finish. A spiky red-haired kid roars. It's not manly to stop someone's introduction. Yeah. Some of the students screams. And she's cute. The purple-bald kid says. Izuku knew his type, the weird pervis. Next Aizawa says before mumbling something along the lines of, the names themselves are self-explanatory. Mashareo Ojiro, a boy with a thick tail says, my quirk is tail dash. Next. Denki Kaminari, a yellow-haired kid with a lightning strike through his hair says as he started to introduce his quirk. Next, your name explains everything. Denki Kaminari, Denki means electricity and Kaminari means lightning. LOL, I'm Eijiro Kirishima. The red-haired boy from earlier says, I respect manly people and my quirk is hardening. Someone clamped the purple ball kid mouth before he could say anything weird. Next. Silence as a small boy with a triangle head stood there. He was petrified and scared of talking. Izuku understood that feeling. Sigh next. Rikido Sato. An older-looking kid says, my quirk is Sugar Rush. Next. Please keep this moving. I don't have enough coffee to keep talking this much. My throat hurts. Izuku stared at his new teacher, wondering how the man at the cafe and the teacher was so different. Plus Aizawa's quirk had to do with dry eyes. What did it have to do with talking anyways? I'm Mizo Shoji, the octopus kid from earlier says, my quirk is dupli arms. I'm Kyukaju, quirk earphone jack. With that she sat back down in her seat. I like that problem child, good at following instructions. Aizawa mutters. I'm Hantasiro, quirk tape, I'm into girls like next Fumikage Tokoyami. Quirk dark shadow. Revelry in the darkness sit down child. Shoto Todoroki. Half and half. The class stayed silent as they waited for more of an explanation. Half and half of what? Ida asks. Wait, the purple ball kid mutters. Next. Aizawa says as the yellow sleeping bag rustles as he moves around. Toru Hagakure Next everyone already knows. We can't see you anyways. I'm Katsuki Bakugu, you little pieces of extras. My quirk is explosions. I'm going to become the next number next. Bakugu stomped back to his desk and slapped his palms down in frustration. You break it, you buy it? Aizawa says as stares at Bakugu. Well, when did he turn around so that he was facing the class? The whole group stares unnerved at their teacher. Next. Aizawa tries again. Bakugu grunts and turns around and shouts in a dazed Izuku's face. Oh. You there. You extra. The teacher is asking for you to introduce yourself to me. Izuku says innocently, pointing at himself. The whole class melts with AWS, mentally, of course, except for Mineta and Bakugu. Yes, you. Okay. Izuku says as he starts walking up to the podium. Aizawa was shooting him interested looks, and Izuku pulls years of acting experience into this moment. This moment and every moment forward he would have to pull himself together. If being a hero failed, Izuku would become an actor. I'm he starts.